Hello everyone. We hope you're doing well. We're doing great, and we truly appreciate your ongoing support. We'd like to briefly address some comments regarding our audiobook series. Rest assured, progress is ongoing. That said, your feedback is vital. If there's a novel you particularly enjoy and want to hear more of, please let us know in the comments. Each chapter requires a financial investment, so we can only continue series that receive strong audience interest. Although we retain core names and plot lines, we make significant editorial changes to enhance clarity, pacing, and immersion. These are not simple recitations. We work hard to deliver a polished, thoughtful listening experience. Without sufficient feedback or engagement, we may need to discontinue a series. So if you're enjoying something, don't stay silent. Your input truly matters. Note, our default audio speed is 3x. If that's too fast, let us know. We're happy to adjust it. Interested in early access to unreleased audiobooks? Visit our Patreon. You'll get to experience new content before it reaches YouTube. Just to clarify, I'm a fan like you. I've purchased these novels and adapted them with care, while respecting all rights and guidelines. For updates, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, X. YouTube update: recently, YouTube flagged some of our content for including mature themes, realistic violence, and darker story elements. As a result, we've decided to stop uploading anything that violates YouTube's guidelines. If you'd like access to the full, uncut versions including the more intense or mature content, you can find them on our Patreon page, where we upload everything first. Available now on Patreon: Shattered Innocence transmigrated into a novel as an extra. Transmigrating over 10,000 years late, I was forced to become a mighty presence. I, the celestial dragon, rule the heavens through the double gate, reigning supreme in countless worlds with beast taming, Tower of God sequence strength, cultivation when you take things to the extreme. Naruto is an Uchiha with cyst. WTF, the centuries-old ancestor in our family take concubine again. Plus 18, Ichi, reincarnated in Bleach as a wizard. Thanks for listening and happy listening. Sighing, he pulled his magical mirror out of his bag of holding and looked himself over. Then he put it away and clasped his hands behind his back, putting a somber, thoughtful expression onto his face. He even seemed to be seeking enlightenment as he stared up into the sky. Before long, two beams of light appeared, which were none other than Master God Diviner and Big Fatty Jong. In the short time which had passed recently, Big Fatty Jong was already in the great circle of Foundation establishment, and was surrounded by some faint, seemingly illusory mist that was quite shocking in appearance. As for Master God Diviner, he was in the early core formation stage, and was equally spectacular looking. They had both been quite shaken by Bazius Hun's performance, and as for his current appearance as he stood there outside of his immortal's cave, it was beyond ordinary. He seemed lofty to an extreme degree, especially the way the wind caused the hem of his garment to stir slowly, along with his long, black hair. Considering the profound look in his eye, he seemed to have the air of a transcendent being, someone who didn't even belong in the mortal world. Junior Patriarch Bazius Hun. Before Big Fatty Jong and Master God Diviner could do anything other than call out a greeting, Bazius Hun swished his sleeve, looking both determined and unhappy. Glancing at them out of the corner of his eye, he said, "Don't try to convince me." Instantly, Big Fatty Jong and Master God Diviner's eyes went wide. Chapter 429, Meld with the Mountain. I hate that Cyan trial by fire. I didn't know what I was doing, otherwise how could I, Bazius Hun, have placed only in the 490s? I'm definitely going to get my star higher. I'm going to get past the cyan part of the rainbow and into the blue portion. Actually, I'm going to go all the way to the violet trial by fire. Just wait until next time and watch me do it. The decisiveness in his voice could sever nails and chop iron, and his entire person seemed to radiate a valiant air. Big Fatty Jong and Master God Diviner were immediately shaken, and stood there a bit awkwardly for a long moment. "Don't be discouraged, Bazius Hun," Big Fatty Jong said finally. "I heard that when you pass the blue trial, you leave a statue behind that other people who take the challenge have to beat in a fight. Of course, that also means that you have to beat the statue left behind by the previous winner. But you shouldn't have any problem next time you challenge the trials. You'll definitely leave your own statue behind." "That's right, Junior Patriarch. The Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect is huge, so you getting into the top 500 is already a huge accomplishment. I'm sure that next time, you'll make even a bigger stir." As they persuaded him, his gaze softened a bit. However, as he looked down from the sky, the regret and defiance could still be seen in his expression. Master God Diviner and Big Fatty Jong weren't quite sure what to make of the situation, so they offered some more encouragement. In the end, though, Bazius Hun still didn't seem to be in a very good mood. Finally, they clasped hands and left. As soon as they were gone, Bazius Hun's expression relaxed, and he looked very proud of himself. Ha ha ha. My performance was spot on. Uzubakai really earned his keep this time. Thinking back to the expressions on the faces of Big Fatty Zhong and Master God Diviner, his excitement rose. However, that was when another beam of light appeared, flying toward him, within which was none other than Chen Manyao. As she approached, Beiziashun once again looked up, clasped his hands behind his back, and put a defiant expression on his face. The profound gleam once again filled his eyes, and before she could even say anything, he said, "Don't try to convince me. I hate that cyan trial by fire." And to Chen Manyao's astonishment, he went on to repeat exactly what he had said to Master God Diviner and Big Fatty Zhong. Chen Manyao was taken aback, and almost felt as if she didn't know this version of Beiziashun who was standing in front of her. "Ziashun, you don't need to feel bad." Over the course of the following several days, whenever people came for a formal visit, they would see this version of Beiziashun, and hear the same words. As a result, the admiration and respect they felt for him continued to grow. 3 days later, Uzubakai finished wrapping up matters in the Live Forever Tavern and was promoted to Sky Quarter Rainbow. The very first thing he did was go to Beiziashun's Immortal's Cave, where the two of them hunkered down for a long meeting. Afterward, Uzubakai requested a sizable sum of merit points for operating expenses and then made his way off, bursting with smugness and pride. Uzubakai really did have some unique methods for digging up information and spreading rumors, and in this situation, he was using his talents to the absolute limit. As he propagated stories about Beiziashun being a chosen, several different tales about Beiziashun began to spread. Some of the stories praised him, and others belittled him, and there were actually some aspects of each story that contradicted the others. However, that only led to more people talking about the subject. Before long, Beiziashun's name was well known in all of Sky Quarter Rainbow. Of course, Beiziashun had his own role to play. He went out every day to places where disciples gathered, his hands clasped behind his back, looking defiant and lost in thought. Of course, the cultivators on Sky Quarter Rainbow weren't familiar with Beiziashun, and so from what they could tell, he looked like the picture of a proud chosen, whose determination and confidence ran deep in his bones. Because of that, many cultivators began to look forward in anticipation to the next time Beiziashun challenged the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials. To be the center of such attention on a daily basis left Beiziashun's heart bursting with joy. Of course, he had long since gone to buy the 7-colored Mustaisi grass, which had been the entire reason he had challenged the trials to begin with. After combining them with the ingredients he had already prepared, he went into secluded meditation for a few days and concocted a medicinal pill that could be used to forget the self. The resulting pill glowed with 7-colored light that reflected in Beiziashun's proud eyes. "This time I'm definitely going to gain enlightenment of the Living Mountain incantation." Spirits soaring, he thought back to the stone golems he had encountered in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trial, and felt more confident than ever about succeeding. Medicinal pill in hand, he flew out of his Immortal's Cave and headed to Myriad Star Rainbow, and the ravine of endless mountains. Outside of the ravine, he once again saw Stone Mountain, sitting there on the boulder, looking very much like a monkey. Yet again, Beiziashun was unable to determine the level of Stone Mountain's cultivation base. Furthermore, there was something about his aura that seemed similar to that of the stone golems. After staring for a moment, he clasped hands and bowed. "Beiziashun offers greetings, Elder Brother Stone Mountain." Stone Mountain's eyes opened, and he looked at Beiziashun for a moment before giving a rare smile and then a nod. Not saying a single word, he waved his hand. Instantly, the ground trembled, and the familiar stone hand stretched out. Beiziashun leaped up onto it, whereupon his vision swam and he was teleported away. When things were clear again, he once again found himself in a strange world, with countless mountain peaks stretching out in all directions. This time, his eyes shone with confidence as he retraced the path he had followed last time until he found the mountain that looked similar to the stone golems. Once he found it, he settled down cross-legged on the giant's head. Then, he produced the medicinal pill he had just concocted, hesitated for a moment, and gritted his teeth. "I acquired the Living Mountain incantation back when I got all of the legacy seals from that legacy zone. If I don't cultivate it to completion, it would definitely be a big waste. I have to succeed this time." Taking a deep breath, he looked down at the medicinal pill he had created to forget himself. "To meld with the mountain," he murmured, "first forget yourself, then forget the mountain. When you wake up, you will be the mountain, and the mountain will be you." Following the methods described in the Living Mountain incantation, he began to seek enlightenment of the structure of the mountain, and then meld with it. He tried several dozen times, until it became something of a reflex to do it. Only then did he place the medicinal pill into his mouth and swallow. Once the medicinal pill sank down into his belly, it melted, transforming into warm currents that filled his body, creating something of a stream leading to his head. Then rumbling sounds filled him, almost like thunder from the heavens. At the same time, his mind began to devolve into chaos, eventually becoming a complete blank. Although his mind was a blank, he remained seated there just as before, trying to gain enlightenment of the structure of the mountain, and then meld with it. Time passed. 3 days later, Bazish-hun was still sitting there motionless. He had forgotten about himself, and his mind was a complete blank. He had even forgotten about the golem-like mountain he was seated upon. His mind seemed to be completely devoid of thought. Eventually, on the 7th day, some simple thoughts appeared in his mind. More days passed, and the thoughts seemed to slowly converge, transforming into the outline of a stone golem. That outline looked very similar to the mountain beneath him, and also the stone golems in the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. Another half a month passed, and Bazish-hun still had not woken up. The image of the stone golem in his mind was growing more and more complete, and increasingly lifelike. Meanwhile, out in the Starry Sky Dow Polarity sect, something happened that rocked the entire sect. Even the sect leader was shaken deeply. Gong Sunwaner challenged the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. At first, few people paid much attention to her. However, as her star rose, people began to notice the unique method she was using to pass the trials, and more people started to pay attention to her. In the Red Trial by Fire, she became a god of death within the sea of lava, slaughtering beasts the entire way and using their corpses to cross the sea. The other disciples in the Trial by Fire with her were completely shocked to see her make a bridge of corpses. In the Orange Trial by Fire, in which the stone golems were fighting each other, all the other disciples cowered in fear, whereas she simply walked straight through. In the Yellow Trial by Fire, she did the same thing by simply walking casually across the metal being forged. In the Green Trial by Fire with the lightning, she actually absorbed much of the lightning through her mouth as she walked across the bridge. Most shocking of all was that in the Cyan Trial, her mere appearance within the trial caused the vengeful souls to tremble and hide away. Only the Soul Emperor showed up to fight her, and in the end, they fought to a draw. The entire Starry Sky Dow Polarity sect was shocked by what had occurred. After all, the Soul Emperor's power was equivalent to the early nascent Soul stage. Chapter 430, I Can Too. As Gong Sunwaner stepped from the Cyan Trial into the Blue Trial, Bazish-hun slowly opened his eyes in the ravine of endless mountains. He had a blank expression, and just barely visible within each eye was the flickering image of a stone golem. Only gradually did he begin to become aware of his surroundings. After enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, he took a deep breath, and was fully conscious. He felt like he had just woken up from a long sleep, with his thoughts being a bit sluggish. Did it work? Rubbing his forehead, he slowly stood up and then checked his cultivation base. However, he still wasn't sure if he had succeeded. Everything that had happened recently was a complete blank. After a moment of hesitation, he used the techniques of the Living Mountain incantation to perform an incantation gesture. When he did, a tremor ran through him, and his eyes widened as an explosively powerful force began to build up inside of him. At almost the exact same instant, the images of 2 stone golems grew clear in his eyes. As for the power inside of him, it continued to build, and he suddenly felt as if his own body were restricting it and making it impossible to release. Without even thinking about it, he opened his mouth. In that instant, a rumbling sound that resembled his voice exploded out in a roar. As it did, the illusory image of a gigantic stone golem appeared above him, roughly 30 meters tall. As he roared, he leapt up into the air, his eyes shining with berserk light. The power inside of him had reached the point where he felt that he had to release it, so he clenched his hand into a fist and then unleashed a punch toward one of the other nearby mountains. Rumbling sounds filled heaven and earth as an enormous force slammed into the mountain peak, causing it to tremble violently and then explode into pieces. The sea of clouds in the area roiled violently, and from a distance, it almost looked like Bazish-hun was at the center of a huge vortex. The power that he had just unleashed was by no means weaker than that of the early nascent soul stage, and had been pure fleshly body power. Perhaps it was even correct to say that it was a magic pertaining to the fleshly body. It was a secret magic just like his throat-crushing grasp, mountain-shaking bash, and undying hex. After unleashing the fist strike, Bazish-hun felt a tremor pass through him. Then, the illusory image of the stone golem faded away into obscurity. Bazish-hun's face was a bit pale, and yet, his eyes were shining with disbelief and excitement. This is totally different from the undying live forever technique. Although I won't be able to use it as many times in a row as the throat-crushing grasp or the mountain-shaking bash, this living mountain incantation is actually the most powerful technique I can unleash. It's way more domineering than the throat-crushing grasp. After a quick check, he confirmed that using the fist strike seemed to converge all of the different types of power in his body, and that after using it, he was almost completely drained. Even still, It was worth it to be able to unleash a strike that could shake heaven and earth. Ha ha ha. I finally succeeded. From now on, the Living Mountain incantation will be one of my trump cards. Humphrey. Baziushun is now invincible to anyone under core formation. Filled with excitement at how awesome he was now, he flew away in high spirits to leave the ravine of endless mountains. Upon emerging out into the open, he immediately turned to look at Stone Mountain on the boulder, hoping to share his success. After all, despite not being able to assess Stone Mountain's cultivation base, he could sense from his aura that he too cultivated the Living Mountain incantation. However, he quickly realized that Stone Mountain was staring off in the direction of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. Elder brother Stone Mountain, Baziushun called out excitedly, I succeeded. Stone Mountain had a very serious expression on his face as he continued to look in the direction of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. Surprised at the reaction, Baziushun repeated himself. Elder brother Stone Mountain, I said that I just succeeded with the Living Mountain incantation. Stone Mountain didn't even look over at him, and in fact, seemed to be getting even more somber by the moment. Oh. Congratulations. The fact that he had just succeeded in fully cultivating a powerful trump card, but had no one to share his joy with, was a bit depressing. However, he couldn't resist the urge to look over at the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials to see what Stone Mountain found so interesting. Almost immediately, he realized that on the blue portion of the rainbow, there was a star that happened to be glittering more brightly than the others, to an eye-catching level. Focusing on the star, he suddenly found that Gong Sunwaner's name had popped into his mind. Huh? He said, jaw-dropping. He quickly took out a command medallion and spent some merit points to see what was happening inside the trial. To his shock, he saw Gong Sunwaner in the blue trial, fighting some unknown young man. His cultivation base was in the great circle of core formation, and he was wearing a cyan robe. His face was expressionless, and he was surrounded by countless swirling bolts of lightning. As he fought back and forth with Gong Sunwaner, he unleashed divine abilities that were definitely beyond his own cultivation level. Despite that, Gong Sunwaner unexpectedly waved her finger, causing the young man to shake violently and then explode into pieces. Baziushun gasped, and as for all of the other cultivators in the Starry Sky Dow Polarity sect who were watching the scene, they were completely shaken. After all, the statue in the blue trial by fire was left behind by the most recent previous successful challenger. In other words, the statue she had just defeated represented a consummate chosen who occupied 8th place in the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars. Anyone who wanted to get into the blue section of the rainbow would have to fight the statue left behind by the previous victorious challenger. That was the only way to get into the violet portion of the rainbow. In the moment that Gong Sunwaner attained victory, a statue of her formed right there in the blue trial by fire. That indicated that anyone who came after her to try to get into the blue trial by fire would have to defeat the statue of Gong Sunwaner in battle. A moment later, Gong Sunwaner vanished, to appear within the violet trial by fire. In that instant, the star which represented her on the outside rose from the blue section of the rainbow all the way to the violet section, becoming the 9th star therein. Countless cries of shock and surprise filled the air. After all, for many years, the current generation of Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars had only seen 8 stars in the violet section of the rainbow. But as of this moment, there were 9. According to the sect rules, anyone who reached the violet portion of the rainbow would have any request they made of the sect fulfilled, as long as it wasn't too excessive. Another thing happened when Gong Sunwaner entered the violet trial. No one could see her anymore. According to the rules of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials, it was permissible to observe the first 6 trials by fire, but as for the final trial, the violet one, only the people who entered the trial itself were allowed to know what happened inside. Very few people were aware of what the violet trial by fire was like. It only took a few moments for Gong Sunwaner to appear back out in the open, and her name remained in the 9th spot. Immediately, rumors began to spread through the sect regarding what that indicated. Even still, Gong Sunwaner had risen to prominence by reaching 9th place. It was a spectacular accomplishment that shook the whole sect. Even more shocking, moments later, a Dharmic decree was sent out from the sect leader's portion of Myriad Star Rainbow. Gong Sunwaner, your request is granted. Henceforth, you are no longer a hostage, but rather, a core disciple of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity sect. Everyone was completely stunned by the announcement, and actually, it was the first time that most people even realized that Gong Sunwaner had been a hostage. As for Baziushun, his eyes were wide with shock. This was his first time realizing how amazing Gong Sunwaner actually was. However, he also felt a bit irritated. Then he thought back to everything that had ever happened with Gong Sunwaner, and suddenly, his vigilance rose. What's so amazing about that? He muttered as he left the ravine of endless mountains. As he walked along, nobody paid much attention to him at all, They were all talking about Gong Sunwaner. More irritated than ever, he returned to Sky Quarter, and found that all of the cultivators there were also talking about Gong Sunwaner. Depressed, he went back into his immortal's cave and sat down. Gritting his teeth, he said, I can do the same thing. I got all the way to the Cyan trial last time. It's just that there were too many ghosts. I should figure out a way to suck all of the ghosts into one place and keep them from moving. Then I can just walk past them. Frowning, he began to think about the matter. A few days later, he looked up, his eyes bloodshot, but his expression one of excitement. Chapter 431, Master, spare me. They're just some little ghosts, right? It'll only take a bit of thinking for Lord Bay to figure out a way to transform them into nothing but ash. Bazius Hun spent several days wrestling with the problem. At first, he considered using evil-warding talismans, but considering the vast numbers of vengeful souls in the Cyan trial by fire, he decided that such a method wouldn't be very reliable. Besides, back when he had first faced all the vengeful souls back then, he had plastered a good amount of such talismans on him, and it hadn't done much good at all. Evil-warding talismans aren't going to work. In that case, I need to concoct a medicinal pill. Only then will I be confident enough to succeed. At that point, his eyes glittered with anticipation. After some thinking, he came up with an idea for a new pill formula that he was sure would work. It wouldn't require many medicinal plant ingredients, and would mostly serve as a vehicle with which to use the powers of gravity and repulsion that he had begun to study in the Spirit Stream sect. I need to concoct a spirit medicine that will cause all of the vengeful souls to gather together in one spot. He wanted to make something that, as soon as it appeared in the open, would cause all of the vengeful souls in the area to rush toward it at top speed. The mere idea of concocting a pill like that got him fidgeting in excitement. Eyebrows dancing in anticipation, he began pacing back and forth in his immortal's cave, continuing to analyze his new pill formula. Finally, he slapped his thigh. This is definitely going to work. The glowing sphere I made with the powers of gravity and repulsion could rip clothes to shreds, and even form hallucination smoke. I can definitely use it to gather souls together. Having reached this point in his train of thought, Bazius Hun made his decision. He rushed out of his immortal's cave and went over to the Hall of Devil Slayers, where he got quite a large collection of medicinal plants, after which he returned and went into secluded meditation. 3 days later, rumbling sounds filled his immortal's cave. Bazius Hun's eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the white spirit medicine he had just concocted. Taking a deep breath, he drew upon the powers of gravity and repulsion and began to infuse them into the pill. Gravitation and repulsion were not easy to cultivate, but Bazius Hun had spent dozens of years on his research, and as such, was able to manipulate them, albeit with some amount of difficulty. It took several hours, but he managed to infuse the medicinal pill with the powers of gravity and repulsion, after which he excitedly pulled out his copper mirror. Imposter Night Crypt, get out here. Imposter Night Crypt's soul shivered. He didn't really have any desire to emerge from the copper mirror, and yet, didn't dare to refuse. Trying not to cry, he flew out into the open. Master, you. Before he could finish his sentence, Bazius Hun shouted, take this. And then he crushed the medicinal pill. A boom rang out, and Bazius Hun's clothes were instantly shredded to pieces, leaving him buck naked. As for Imposter Night Crypt, he instantly screamed, and yet, after a moment, the scream faded into an exclamation of surprise. Huh? I'm not hurt. Ha ha ha. I'm fine. Imposter Night Crypt hadn't been affected at all. Excited, he looked over at Bazius Hun, who was looking back at him with his bloodshot eyes twitching a bit. Imposter Night Crypt shivered, and then slunk off to the side, convinced that Bazius Hun was in a very dangerous mood. Panting, Bazius Hun looked down at the crushed remnants of the medicinal pill. Then he completely ignored Imposter Night Crypt, threw on another set of clothing, and began to concoct another pill. Another 3 days passed. Take this. Bazius Hun shouted, crushing the medicinal pill. A boom rang out, and this time, his clothes were completely unaffected. However, the force of the explosion slammed Bazius Hun into the wall of the Immortal's cave, causing cracks to spread out in all directions. Only after a long moment passed did Bazius Hun then fall down to the ground, leaving a human-shaped indentation in the wall. Face ashen, and yet also filled with determination, he gritted his teeth and started working again. As for Imposter Night Crypt, when he saw what had just happened, he couldn't help but gasp. What? What kind of medicine is he concocting? Another 4 days passed, and another medicinal pill appeared in Bazius Hun's hand. His eyes were so bloodshot that they were almost completely red as he backed up until he was leaning up against the wall. Convinced that this time would be a success, he crushed the pill and shouted, "All right, take this." This time, his clothing was again shredded to pieces, and instead of being pushed backward, he was pulled forward, body completely out of his own control as he slammed into the opposite wall. Popping sounds rang out, and cracks spread out in the wall. Meanwhile, Imposter Nightcrypt looked at Bazius-hun, shivering violently. He's not concocting medicine, he's trying to kill himself. Imposter Nightcrypt was shaking in fear and anxiety, not at the prospect of Bazius-hun dying, but at the fact that Bazius-hun had tested the first pill on him. He couldn't imagine what fate he would meet if Bazius-hun succeeded in concocting whatever pill he was planning. By this point, Bazius-hun was furious. After struggling to get out of the wall, he once again began to concoct. A few more days went by, and he had a new version of his spirit medicine. This time, he crawled into one of the holes he had previously punched into the wall, in the hopes that such a position would keep him safe. With that, he gritted his teeth and prepared to crush the pill. Unable to keep control of himself, Imposter Nightcrypt wailed, "Master, spare me." Bazius-hun sighed and said, "Trust me, this time it's going to work." With that he crushed the pill. Instantly, a huge boom rang out as the powers of gravitation and repulsion erupted out. This time, the pill merely exploded, and Bazius-hun, despite being hidden in the wall, was still hit by the blast. The entire mortal's cave even rocked back and forth. Bazius-hun was wrenched out of his position in the wall and slammed into the ground, where he lay for a long moment before struggling back into a sitting position. Then, he yet again began to concoct medicine, seemingly as if his life depended on it. Imposter Nightcrypt was trembling on the verge of collapse, and couldn't stop wondering what his future held. It was a true torment. Every time he saw the tragic results when Bazius-hun crushed one of his pills, his terror mounted. A few more days passed, and Bazius-hun started to get ready to perform another test. Wailing, Imposter Nightcrypt said, "Master, spare me, please." He truly wished to be spared. He felt like a prisoner on death row, whose head had been placed on a chopping block, only to have the axe veer to the side and miss its mark over and over again. It was a truly agonizing feeling. "Trust me, this time it's going to work." Howling, Bazius-hun crushed the medicinal pill, causing another boom to echo out. Time passed. 2 whole months. During that time, Bazius-hun's Immortal's Cave continued to rock and sway on a regular basis. As for Bazius-hun himself, were it not for the fact that he had a tremendously powerful fleshly body, he would have been severely injured on several occasions. Finally, on a day when Imposter Nightcrypt was racked with despair, a boom rang out, and a powerful gravitational force erupted out. Imposter Nightcrypt was instantly grabbed up and, in almost the exact same instant, was sucked over to Bazius-hun's palm. Ha ha ha. Success at last. Bazius-hun cried, standing there in the wreckage of his Immortal's Cave, his hair in complete disarray, but his expression one of pure excitement. Clearly, Imposter Nightcrypt hadn't been the only one to be in torment over the past 2 months. As of this moment, he had created a medicinal pill that, when crushed, would unleash the powers of gravity and repulsion, and drag any nearby soul bodies to the location where the pill had been crushed. "I'm going to call it the Soul Convergence Pill." With that, he threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Although he was tired, he was almost mad with excitement, and had already decided that he would rest up a bit and then go challenge the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials again. "This time I'm definitely going to show those measly ghosts a thing or two." Feeling prouder of himself than ever, he concocted some more soul convergence pills, then settled down cross-legged to do some breathing exercises. Over the following month, Bazius-hun went mad concocting soul convergence pills. Whenever he got tired, he would do some breathing exercises, then start work again as soon as possible. As time went along, not only did he build up a shockingly large collection of pills, but because of the constant cycle of exhausting himself and then recovering, his cultivation base began to creep closer toward the late gold core stage. One day when he finished a run of concocting, and had just settled down to do some breathing exercises, he suddenly looked out of his Immortal's Cave, an expression of surprise on his face. Soon, 3 beams of light became visible, flying toward him. They were none other than Master God Diviner, Chen Man Yao, and Zubachi, and all of them looked very anxious. Considering he was at the peak of the mid-gold core stage, Bazius-hun could tell even from a distance that they were upset, and that something was clearly going on. Even before they reached the Immortal's Cave, they began to call out at the tops of their lungs. "Junior Patriarch, Big Fatty Zhong's in trouble. Ziushun, hurry up and save Big Fatty Zhong." Upon hearing their words, Bazius-hun's face fell. Swishing his sleeve, he slammed open the door of the Immortal's Cave and rushed out in a blast of wind. Grabbing Master God Diviner by the shoulders, he shouted, "What's wrong with eldest brother?" Chapter 432, Racked with Anxiety. Master God Diviner could see how anxious Bazius-hun was, and knew how important Big Fatty Zhong was to him. Shivering, he replied, "Big Fatty Zhong is trying to reach core formation, and fell into a deadly crisis." Looking equally anxious, Zubakai offered further explanation. "Last month, Elder brother Zhang could tell that he was on the verge of reaching core formation, and went into secluded meditation. Master God Diviner and I stood as Dharma protectors outside of his immortal's cave. At first, everything seemed normal, and we assumed he would only need a couple of months to finish the process. But for some reason, on the third day, his aura began to weaken. As of now, there's only a faint bit of it left. I went too, Chen Manyao said anxiously, but his immortal's cave is sealed tight, and we can't get in. We didn't want to blow up the door either, in case that would cause further problems. Considering how long she had been part of the group, she considered herself part of them now, and was just as anxious as they were about Big Fatty Zhang being in danger. After hearing their explanations, Beziashun didn't hesitate for even a moment. Transforming into a beam of prismatic light, he shot through the air at high speed toward Big Fatty Zhang's immortal's cave. Master God Diviner, Zhu Bekai and Chen Manyao all followed along as fast as they could. After enough time passed for an incense stick to burn, Big Fatty Zhang's immortal's cave appeared up ahead. Beziashun's heart was pounding with nervousness. Big Fatty Zhang was his eldest brother, and the two of them had a deep connection. After all, the two of them had begun their friendship on the very day Beziashun joined the Spirit Stream sect. His mind was almost a complete blank as he landed in front of the immortal's cave, the door of which was sealed tightly. Beziashun quickly sent out some divine sense, backed by the power of his mid-gold core stage cultivation base. Almost instantly, he could sense Big Fatty Zhang's aura, and how weak it was. Apparently, the flame of his life force was on the verge of being snuffed out. It almost looked as if he had made repeated efforts to reach core formation, and had failed each time, causing much of his life force to waste away. How could this be happening? Beziashun said. Eyes bloodshot, he clenched his hands into fists and then called upon the explosive power of his undying hex, as well as the frigid chi that came from being on the verge of the frigid master level. Almost instantly, the door of the immortal's cave was covered with spiderweb-like cracks, before exploding into bits. Beziashun charged inside, to find Big Fatty Zhang sitting there as ashen as death, looking like a little more than a skeleton. A faint mist surrounded him, some of which would occasionally be sucked into his body before flowing out again. As that happened, Big Fatty Zhang's aura slowly faded, to be replaced by an increasingly strong aura of death. From the look of it, he was hovering on the very brink of perishing. Eldest brother. Beziashun murmured. It felt like his heart was being cut in half by the sharpest of blades. Without hesitation, he reached out and put his right hand on the top of Big Fatty Zhang's head, then poured life force into him, hoping to bolster the flickering flame of his life force. It only took a moment for Beziashun to realize that there was some sort of strange power inside of Big Fatty Zhang, something that was repelling the outside life force. That power felt like some sort of complete and utter determination. Furthermore, there in Big Fatty Zhang's dungeon region was a dense cloud of mist that looked almost like a sphere. Every so often, the mist would converge together into the shape of a core, after which it would fall apart. Apparently, the mist swirling around Big Fatty Zhang had been created by the same force. What's going on? Beziashun said, stunned. Because of the force of expulsion inside of Big Fatty Zhang, any life force he sent in was almost completely dispelled. At best, he could slightly reduce the speed at which Big Fatty Zhang's life force was fading away. At the current rate, it would likely be only 2 hours or so before Big Fatty Zhang wasted away into death. It was in that moment that Master God Diviner and Chen Manyao arrived. When they saw Big Fatty Zhang's appearance, they both gasped. How is this possible? Master God Diviner said, looking shocked. Big Fatty Zhang was only in secluded meditation for a month. How could he have been reduced to this state? It looks like he made 10 failed attempts at reaching core formation. Chen Manyao looked a bit more closely at the mist, and then suddenly, she said, that mist. Big Fatty Zhang is a spirit enhancer. Could it be that he's trying to form a will core? Will core? Beziashun looked up at Chen Manyao, his expression fierce, not because of Chen Manyao, but because he was hovering on the brink of madness because of Big Fatty Zhang. Chen Manyao immediately revealed everything she knew about will cores. In ancient times, spirit enhancers often attempted to form will cores. However, it's fundamentally very dangerous, and nowadays, virtually no one even tries. Only someone completely and utterly confident in their spirit enhancement abilities could attempt it successfully. It's basically like creating something from nothing. If the spirit enhancer successfully forms the will core, he will experience incredible good fortune afterward. But if he fails, he will be killed beyond the shadow of a doubt. Upon hearing the explanation, a tremor ran through Beziashun, and he suddenly realized he had sensed a form of utter confidence within the mist inside Big Fatty Zhang. Suddenly, a look of regret appeared on Beziashun's face. Will core. He couldn't help but think back to the Spirit Stream sect, and how he had tricked Big Fatty Zhang into thinking he had succeeded, all to prevent his feelings from being hurt. From that moment on, Big Fatty Zhang's journey along the path of spirit enhancement had completely changed. As of this moment, Baizish Hun realized that Big Fatty Zhang's path of spirit enhancement was closely related to his confidence, and that his confidence had been significantly affected by Baizish Hun himself. You guys keep feeding him as much life force as you can. I'm going to get a nascent soul Taoist master. With one final glance at Big Fatty Zhang's dwindling aura, Baizish Hun raced out of the Immortals' Cave and headed toward the Hall of Devil's Lairs. Master God Diviner and Chen Man Yao immediately began to pour life force into Big Fatty Zhang, as did Subachi, who had only just arrived. Baizish Hun's eyes were bloodshot as he raced along, his mind empty except for a single thought: he could not allow Big Fatty Zhang to die. A whistling sound echoed out in all directions on Sky Quarter Rainbow as he shot at top speed toward the Hall of Devil Slayers. The Hall of Devil Slayers was some distance from Big Fatty Zhang's Immortals' Cave, and Baizish Hun couldn't have been more anxious. Therefore, he used as much speed as possible, unleashing the mountain-shaking bash and also relying on the power of the undying tendons in his left leg. Before long, he was nearing the Hall of Devil's Lairs. However, it was at that point that, just up ahead, 5 cultivators were being blocked from passing through the area. The people blocking their path were 3 disciples wearing long green robes, with cold expressions on their faces. When they saw Baizish Hun hurrying in their direction, one of them realized who he was, and hesitated a moment before calling out, "You there, get back. This whole 500-kilometer area is set aside for our young lord's personal cultivation." Yeah. Our young lord is Semafiru. Apparently, they thought that uttering the name Semafiru would be a huge threat. After all, this was essentially the same thing they said to anyone who tried to pass through this area. Quite a few people on Sky Quarter Rainbow were familiar with Semafiru. After all, he ranked 97 in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity Superstars. As a member of the top 100, he was extremely famous. At any other time, when he was in his usual mood, Baizish Hun would never have bickered with these people about being able to pass through. But at the moment, his heart was on fire because of the situation with Big Fatty Zhang, and he had absolutely no patience. He couldn't have cared less if Semafiru had the area locked down. In fact, if an even more famous chosen had done the same thing, he still wouldn't have taken the time to go around. At this moment, every breath of time counted. Completely ignoring the 3 green-robed disciples, he continued onward at top speed. The 3 disciples' faces flickered, and one of them said, "How dare." However, before he could finish speaking, Baizish Hun roared, "Beat it!" Instantly, a wild wind sprang up, and the 3 disciples' ears filled with deafening rumbling sounds as an incredible force smashed into them, forcing them off to the side as Baizish Hun shot past them into Semafiru's sealed, 500-kilometer land. Almost immediately, a powerful aura erupted from a deep cistern within that 500-kilometer area. "Who dares to interrupt my cultivation?" Along with the voice which echoed out, a magical technique was unleashed that caused a huge face to appear above the cistern. It was the face of a young man, twisted in rage. This person was none other than Semafiru. Chapter 433, 12 hours. In the moment that Semafiru's voice echoed out, a burst of late core formation cultivation base power erupted out from the cistern. Simultaneously, 10 figures shot up into the air from various directions, which were none other than Semafiru's followers. Cold smiles could be seen on all of their faces. Clearly, they were confident that anyone who disturbed their young lord's cultivation would meet a grisly fate. This was not the first time Semafiru had staked claim to a cultivation area, nor was it the first time someone had attempted to interfere with him when he did. However, nobody had ever been successful in an attempt to drive him away, and everyone always ended up backing down. As for Baizish Hun, in his anxiety and rage, his eyes flickered with cold light as he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and pointed down at the freezing cistern. "Shut up!" he shouted, unleashing the frigid school will evolving incantation through his right index finger. Instantly, frigid chi that bordered on the frigid master level shot down. Even as Semafiru prepared to burst out of his cistern, the frigid chi poured down like a beam of light, slamming into the water. Instantly, cracking sounds rang out, and the entire cistern was frozen solid. Not only was the cistern frozen, but the gigantic face was as well, and even Semafiru as he prepared to burst out into the open. Semafiru's face fell. Before he could even struggle, he was locked in place, and the terrifying frigid chi that entered him turned him into a statue of ice. His mouth was stuck open, and his eyes were wide with complete and utter disbelief. As for his followers in the area, they all gasped, and their eyes went wide. How? How is this possible? Question mark. Is that Baizish Hun? Heavens. He only ranks in the 490s, doesn't he? I can't believe he sealed Semafiru with a single wave of a finger. Semafiru's followers were left with minds spinning as Baizish Hun flew past them. Considering his speed, It didn't take him long to reach the Hall of Devil Slayers, which he entered without the slightest hesitation. Outside, Bazius wasn't extremely famous, but inside the Hall of Devil Slayers, everyone treated him with the utmost respect. Because of how Feng Yao cared for him, Bazius could do virtually anything he wanted. Nobody dared to interfere with him at all, and within moments, he was in front of the main temple. Upon entering the temple, he immediately caught sight of Feng Yao sitting at the far end. Hurrying over, he clasped hands and bowed deeply. Bazius offers greetings, Taoist Master. Taoist Master, I beg of you to save a life. What's wrong this time? Feng Yao said, a bit begrudgingly. Bazius quickly explained the situation with Big Fatty Zhang, and continued to beg for Feng Yao's help, bowing over and over again at the waist as he did so. Feng Yao's expression soon turned serious. He had never seen Bazius acting so earnestly. After hearing the situation, he thought for a moment, and then frowned. A Hueco, huh? Very well, I'll go take a look. With that, he rose to his feet. Even as Bazius continued to bow and scrape, Feng Yao flicked his sleeve, taking Bazius away with him in a teleportation. When they reappeared, they were about 500 kilometers away, whereupon they teleported again. That put them outside of Big Fatty Zhang's Immortal's cave. To see a teleportation magic like that with his own eyes left Bazius shaken, and at the same time, a bit envious. Feng Yao led the way into Big Fatty Zhang's Immortal's cave, where Master God Diviner, Chen Man Yao, and Zhu Bekai were waiting. When they saw that Bazius had brought Feng Yao with him, they quickly bowed and backed away. Feng Yao cared about Bazius, but not the others, so he paid them absolutely no attention. Walking over to Big Fatty Zhang, he put his hand onto his forehead and sent some divine sense into him. After inspecting him for a moment, his expression turned even more grave than before. When Bazius saw that, his heart began to pound, and his face drained of blood. It really is a Hueco, Feng Yao said, withdrawing his hand and frowning. Sighing, he looked over at Bazius. Half a month ago, I might have been able to help. But at this point, he's a candle flickering in the wind, only a step away from death. I simply don't have the power to save him. Bazius felt like he had been hit with a sledgehammer. His heart was pounding, and his face was pale white as he staggered backward a few paces. Grief filled him, pushing him to the point where he felt like he was going to collapse. Almost immediately, he began to think back to all his memories of Big Fatty Zhang. Isn't there some other way? He said, looking over at the corpse like Big Fatty Zhang. Who was he to you? Feng Yao asked, a profound light gleaming in his eyes. He's my eldest brother. Bazius replied. From the look in his eyes, he would clearly pay any price to save Big Fatty Zhang. Feng Yao was shaken by the level of determination he saw. Up to this point, he had only been watching out for Bazius because of the promise given him by the Heavenspan emissary. But now, after seeing the look in his eyes, he could sense a level of sentiment in Bazius that he hadn't seen for quite some time. Who would have thought that this kid would care so much about his friends? He murmured inwardly. Based on the level of his cultivation base, and his years of experience, he could tell that Bazius was not putting on a show. After a moment of thought, he inspected Big Fatty Zhang more thoroughly. Enough time passed for half an incense stick to burn, whereupon he said, you might still have a chance to save your eldest brother. However, the help of a nascent soul cultivator won't do it. You would need a Deva realm cultivator from the senior generation. Either that, or the power of a Deva. Only then could the chaos surrounding the Hueco be nullified, and the core fully formed. A tremor ran through Bazius, and his eyes began to shine with bright light. Without the slightest hesitation, he said, the power of a Deva? How do I get that? I'll pay all of my merit points if I have to. Even Master God Diviner, Chen Man Yao, and Zhu Bekai could sense the unswerving determination in his voice. Feng Yao shook his head. The power of a Deva can come only when an almighty Deva gathers some of his or her aura into a talisman, transforming it into a disposable magical item. Usually, Devas will give such talismans to their apprentices as a form of protection. Such items take years to craft, and are astronomically valuable. They're not the type of thing you can purchase with merit points. Master God Diviner sucked in a breath and exchanged a glance with Zhu Bekai. Based on what they had just heard, it didn't seem like ordinary disciples would ever be able to get that type of item, something which was normally reserved for the apprentices of Devas. Bazius turned even more ashen than before, and yet, he now had hope. If you want to get the power of a Deva, Feng Yao continued, you would have to take a Deva as your master. Either that, or challenge the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials, and reach the violet section of the rainbow. At that point, you would receive a boon from the sect, and could request the power of a Deva. The violet section of the rainbow. Zhu Bekai said faintly. Is that even possible? Despite having only been in the Rainbow District for a short time, Uchiha had learned a bit about the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars, and he knew that reaching the violet portion of the rainbow was indescribably difficult. The violet trial by fire was the final trial, and in the current generation of disciples, there had long since been only 8 in that group. It was only recently that Gongsun had become the 9th. If someone else reached that level, there would be 10. Uchiha wasn't the only one to be taken aback. Master God Diviner and Chen Manyao were also shocked. Although all of them had confidence in Baziushun, when they heard that he needed to get the power of a deva by reaching the violet portion of the rainbow, their faces fell. Baziushun stood there quietly for a few breaths of time, then looked up. How much time do I have? Feng Yao sighed. You've made up your mind, then. Very well. I'll take your eldest brother back to the Hall of Devil's Layers to watch over him. Even still, you'll have no more than 12 hours. The look in Baziushun's eyes turned as sharp as the edge of blade. Many thanks, Taoist Master. I'll leave this instant. Without even the slightest hint of hesitation, he turned, rushed out of the Immortal's Cave, and sped toward the teleportation portal. Chapter 434, Challenging the Trials Again. 12 hours. Baziushun thought as he sped across Sky Quarter Rainbow. As of this moment, his veins of steel were pulsing, and he seemed ready to risk his life and fight to the death. He couldn't just let Big Fatty Zhong die, nor any of his other friends. He knew that the cultivation world was a brutal place, and that he was relatively powerless to alter the course of major events, but he still couldn't give up. Back when war had been on the cusp of breaking out between the spirit and bloodstream sects, he hadn't given up. Back during the fight between the River-defying sect and the Sky River Court, he hadn't given up. Back during the fighting at the Mountain of Legacy Seals, he hadn't given up. And neither would he give up now. That was his way of walking the path of immortal cultivation. That was his decision. That was what was important to him. Baziushun drew upon all the power of his cultivation base to shoot at top speed toward the teleportation portal. Then, he sped through Myriad Star Rainbow toward the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. From the moment he busted open the door of Big Fatty Zhong's Immortal's Cave to the moment he reached the entrance of the trials, only 2 incense sticks worth of time had passed. Currently, a few hundred cultivators were gathered there. Many of them spent a lot of time at the entrance, watching the performances of others in the hopes of improving their own chances of success. There was quite a din of conversation in the area, but as soon as Baziushun appeared, he was noticed by some of the gathered cultivators. After all, his previous charge all the way to the 400s had been an unusual event that drew a lot of attention. Baziushun. He's back. How long has it been? I've heard of this guy. People said he was really irritated at his last performance, and that the next time he challenged the trials, he would definitely rise in the rankings. Everyone began to look over at Baziushun, which would normally cause him to slow down and relish the praise. But he wasn't in the mood for that now. His expression was grim, and he even radiated a murderous aura as he shot past the crowds and into the entrance, not pausing for a moment. When challenging the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials, one had to start all over from the beginning. That was a standard rule that no one could change. Regardless of the fact that Baziushun's star was high up on the cyan portion of the rainbow, he still had to start from the first trial. His vision swam, and when things became clear again, a blast of heat hit his face. Without pause, he leapt off of the cliff and dropped down toward the sea of lava. As soon as he touched the surface of the lava, his eyes glittered, and he unleashed all of the speed he was capable of. Rumbling sounds echoed out as he shot forward, causing huge waves to roll out on the sea of lava. He almost seemed to be running along a flat surface, which, combined with his murderous aura, caused all the other trial takers in the area to gasp. Meanwhile, some in the crowd outside were already spending merit points to watch Baziushun's performance. Of those, most had expected him to do the same thing he had last time, and swim through the lava. Therefore, the scene playing out now caused their hearts to seize with shock, and almost immediately, people began to cry out in shock. That in turn caused more people to start watching him challenge the trials. He's doing something different from the first time. He's actually running on top of the lava. Heavens! It was shocking enough when Gongsun killed her way across, but seeing Baziushun run on the surface of the sea is equally astonishing. As everyone outside cried out in shock, Baziushun proceeded forward with a grim expression on his face, not reducing his speed at all, and in fact, accelerating. He only used a bit more time than it takes half an incense stick to burn to cross the entire sea of lava, step onto the far shore, and enter the second trial. In the second trial, the stone golems were still fighting fiercely. Boulders rained from the sky, and fierce winds swept about. However, Baziushun didn't stop for even a moment. None of the obstacles in the challenge seemed to affect him at all, and all of them actually crumbled before even touching him. However, that almost didn't count for anything compared to the most shocking development of all. To the astonishment of the crowd, the two enormous stone golems actually stopped fighting when they noticed Baziush-hun. "Get me through this place," Baziush-hun said, calling upon the power of the living mountain incantation. Although he didn't summon his own stone golem, the aura of the incantation itself was enough that the stone golems could sense it. To them, it felt very familiar, almost as if something or someone was communicating with them. As soon as Baziush-hun asked for help getting through the trial, it was to the utter astonishment of the crowds that one of the stone golems actually reached down toward Baziush-hun, not to attack him, but to grab him and throw him through the air toward the exit. Explosive rumblings sounds could be heard as Baziush-hun was propelled by the full power of the stone golem, transforming into something like a shooting star that pierced through the air of the second trial and right into the teleportation portal leading to the third trial. He had passed through the first and second trials in less time than it takes an incense stick to burn. Everyone on the outside was going mad with astonishment. Heavens! This Baziush-hun. He was actually holding back last time. By now, the cultivators outside were starting to send messages to their friends, causing more and more cultivators to pay attention to the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trial. Meanwhile, Baziush-hun was already in the third trial, the one that featured the enormous blacksmith and ironworks. Currently, the enormous sword that was the path to the exit was being beaten by the blacksmith with his hammer. Just like before, Baziush-hun didn't hesitate for a moment. Instead of trying to make his way across the sword, he dove right down into the frigid sea below. This time, he didn't absorb any frigid chi, but instead, drew upon his own frigid chi to freeze everything in the area. Then, just like he had done with the sea of lava, he began speeding across the surface. Something different happened in this trial, though. Almost as soon as the huge blacksmith noticed Baziush-hun in the frigid sea, his expression twisted with rage as he recalled what had occurred last time. Roaring, he reached down with his huge hand to grab Baziush-hun. As the hand bore down, Baziush-hun's murderous aura spiked, and instead of dodging, he drew upon his undying live forever technique, and especially the fleshly body power in the undying tendons of his left leg. Then, just before the hand grabbed him, he managed to kick off of it, causing incredible rumbling sounds to echo out. Blood sprayed out of his mouth from the force, but he managed to make use of it to accelerate, and fly at top speed toward the exit. As for the hand, it stopped in place, the veins stretching out from the point of the kick's impact apparently having been sealed. The hand was temporarily locked in place, causing the blacksmith to roar in rage. Then he slowly clenched his hand into a fist, causing many of the veins to burst before he regained motion. However, in that short period of time, Baziush-hun disappeared into the exit. Again, he didn't even use the time it takes an incense stick to burn. As of this moment, he was in the fourth trial. The green trial had the Bridge of Lightning. However, Baziush-hun didn't appear to be fazed by the lightning at all, and instantly proceeded forward with incredible speed. Lightning slammed into him, but he didn't slow down at all. No matter how the lightning inundated him, his speed wasn't reduced, and in less time than it takes an incense stick to burn, he was at the end of the trial. When he disappeared into the exit, the people in the audience looked on in stunned silence. He only used 2 incense sticks worth of time to pass the first 4 trials. Heavens! How much was he holding back last time? This speed is unbelievable. He's crushing the trials even more than Gong Sunwaner. This is crazy. He's heading into the Cyan trial now. Last time, that was where he stopped. Everyone seemed to think that there was something strange going on with Baziush-hun, but didn't put too much thought into it. They were all very curious to see how he fared in the Cyan trial. The Cyan trial was a world of vengeful souls and endless gravestones. As soon as Baziush-hun appeared, Cyan smoke rose up, and countless terrifying souls appeared. Staring at Baziush-hun, they let loose heaven-shaking, earth-shattering howls. Chapter 435, The Power of the Soul Convergence Pill. The sight of so many vengeful souls left Baziush-hun shivering a bit. Ghosts filled him with indescribable fear, and yet, right now he had no other option available but to face them. "Shut up!" he yelled with just as much rage as all the howling vengeful souls. Time was of the essence at the moment, and the only thing that occupied his thoughts at the moment was that he only had 12 hours to get to the Violet Trial by fire. Big Fatty Zhang's life was on the line. Even as Baziush-hun yelled at the souls, they flew into the air toward him. As for Baziush-hun, he didn't back down, nor did he slow his pace. Instead, he shot directly toward the vengeful souls. Outside, the cultivators of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity sect looked on, their eyes glued to the scene playing out in front of them. All of them were incredibly intent on seeing how Baziush-hun tackled the Cyan trial. It looks like this Baziush-hun is going to use some sort of divine ability or something. This trial tests how long you can stand up to the bombardment of the vengeful souls, and how many you can take out. Anyone who wants to last any length of time has to be very careful about their spiritual power, and not waste a single bit. It requires a lot of control. Gong Sunwaner pulled off something of a miracle. The vengeful souls didn't dare to actually fight her, although the effect didn't do anything to the Soul Emperor. Even still, something like that never happened before in history. I wonder how many souls this Baziush-hun will take out. Even as the discussions played out in the audience, Baziush-hun was inside the Cyan trial, rocketing toward the incoming vengeful souls at top speed. From a distance, it looked like a sea of souls, shaking heaven and earth as they screamed through the air. However, in the moment before that sea crashed into Baziush-hun, he slapped his bag of holding to produce a medicinal pill. It was white, and didn't emit any medicinal aroma. In fact, it didn't seem to be extraordinary in any way. As for the audience, they were stunned, and couldn't imagine why Baziush-hun would possibly pull out a medicinal pill at this critical moment. But then, Baziush-hun hurled the pill down toward the ground, simultaneously shouting, "Take this." The instant the pill hit the ground, it shattered, sending invisible ripples spreading out in all directions. At the same time, the faces of the incoming vengeful souls flickered as they suddenly changed directions and flew down toward the location of the shattered pill. Apparently, their soul bodies were completely beyond their own control. Some sort of indescribably powerful gravitational force had appeared, which sucked in the vengeful souls, crushing them together. First it was 10, then 100, then 1,000, and then 10,000. Almost instantly, an opening appeared within the sea of souls, right in front of Baziush-hun. At the same time, more than 10,000 souls were sucked down toward the ground, screaming the entire time. In the blink of an eye, a black, fist-sized sphere took shape. Within that glowing sphere were more than 10,000 vengeful souls. The audience members' minds were spinning, and they looked on with wide eyes as Baziush-hun flew forward without pausing for a moment. As he did, he produced another of his soul convergence pills. Every time he threw out one of the pills, all of the souls in the area would be sucked into a black, glowing sphere. Gradually, the vengeful souls grew fewer and fewer as more and more black spheres appeared, each of them filled with numerous screaming souls, none of whom could escape. Eventually, Baziush-hun saw the enormous Soul Emperor in the middle of the Cyan trial by fire. Unleashing his cultivation base power, the Soul Emperor shot toward Baziush-hun and howled, "Begone from this place." Power erupted from the Soul Emperor, causing the sky to dim, and yet, Baziush-hun simply waved his right hand, throwing out dozens of soul convergence pills at the same time. "Take this," he shouted. As the pills exploded, the howling Soul Emperor's face suddenly filled with disbelief and shock. Without any warning, his body suddenly split up into dozens of parts, all of which were sucked away and sealed by the medicinal pills. Baziush-hun didn't even pay attention to the result. Instead, he continued to speed here and there, tossing out medicinal pills. After the time it takes an incense stick to burn. The Cyan trial by fire, which had caused problems for countless cultivators in the past, was devoid of even a single vengeful soul. Baziush-hun sped past countless gravestones toward the far end of the trial by fire, and then vanished into the exit. The spectators outside were trembling in shock. They had had their speculations about what would happen, but never could any of them have imagined that Baziush-hun would use a shocking method like this to pass the trial. From ancient times until the present, no one had ever done anything like it. Everyone knew that the point of this trial was to exterminate as many vengeful souls as possible, and yet, as of this moment, the trial was completely empty. This. I thought Gong Sunwaner's performance was spectacular. I never thought that this Baziush-hun would actually surpass her. The vengeful souls didn't dare to attack Gong Sunwaner, and she fought to a draw with the Soul Emperor. But Baziush-hun, he actually absorbed the Soul Emperor. Soon, a deathly silence fell over the audience. Baziush-hun's run through the trials was doing much the same as Gong Sunwaner's. The entire sect was shaken as word spread, and more people began to turn their attention toward the trials. Back on Sky Quarter Rainbow, in the main temple in the Hall of Devil Slayers, Big Fatty Zhang was sitting cross-legged just like he had been before. By this point, he was completely without consciousness, and the flame of his life force was almost gone. Were Feng Yao not there to bolster him, that flame would already have flickered out. Outside of the temple, Zhu Baikai and Master God Diviner were watching the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials, along with Chen Man Yao. All of them were completely shaken by what Baziush-hun was pulling off. The other disciples in the sect didn't really know Baziush-hun, but they did. Given his personality, they knew that he normally wouldn't take risks like this. Everything he was doing was for the sake of Big Fatty Zhang. As the news about Baziush-hun spread, shaking the sect, he appeared within the blue trial by fire. In total, He had used only a bit more than an hour to pass all 5 of the previous trials, and yet, that was not a reason for him to relax. He was now at the final challenge, after which he would be able to enter the Violet stage. In terms of ranking, he didn't care about that, and wasn't even thinking of it. However, he knew that this trial would be the most difficult. After all, his opponent here would be Gongsun. Or, more precisely, a statue of Gongsun. The dimension in which the blue trial took place wasn't large, only about 30,000 meters across. Beyond those borders, everything was a blur. Within the very center of the 30,000-meter area was a lone statue depicting a young woman. She was beautiful, but there was something strange about her. She pulsed with a frigid aura that caused everything around her to turn a light blue color. At almost the exact same instant that Baziush-hun appeared, the statue's eyes opened, revealing an intense coldness as they locked onto Baziush-hun. That gaze was like a pair of knives stabbing into Baziush-hun's own eyes and piercing into his mind. A tremor ran through him, along with an intense sensation of deadly crisis. He had fought once with Gongsun, long ago. However, after returning from the Bloodstream sect, he had always felt that there was something very strange about her, although he couldn't quite put his finger on what that was. Because of that, he had always avoided her. At long last, in this blue trial by fire, he would be tangling with her once again. Although this was only a statue representing her, Baziush-hun knew that it would attack him with the full power that Gongsun had used when she challenged the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. Furthermore, he knew that unless Gongsun had held back during her own fight, this statue would be just as powerful as she was in real life. Although it wouldn't be quite as intelligent as she was, because it wasn't a real-life form, it wouldn't sense any pain. In the end, the statue's strong points would cancel out its weak points, and vice versa. As soon as Baziush-hun's gaze locked with Gongsun-wan's, her body blurred, and 4 versions of herself appeared, almost like clones. Incantation gestures flashed, and they all waved their fingers in Baziush-hun's direction. Instantly, 4 streams of light shot toward him, each one a different color. As they streamed through the air, they intersected with each other, forming into a nice flower with 4 petals, each one a different color. Then, the flower began to rotate rapidly as it shot toward Baziush-hun. As it passed along, the ground beneath the spinning flower froze up, and the temperature dropped rapidly, until cracking sounds rang out in all directions. On each of the 4 flower petals was a face that resembled Gongsun, smiling in an enigmatic and bizarre fashion. Baziush-hun was even sure that he could hear sinister chuckling. Despite the hair-raisingly terrifying smiles, Baziush-hun knew that there was no time to ponder the situation. Drawing upon his frigid school will evolving incantation, he performed an incantation gesture with his right hand and then shoved it out in front of him. Chapter 436, Battling Gongsun. That simple gesture, backed by the frigid school will evolving incantation, as well as his gold core, caused frigid chi from the frigid adept level to surge out, distorting the air as it shot to meet the 4-colored ice flower. When they made contact, a huge boom echoed out in all directions. 3 of the flower's petals shattered into ash, but the final one only grew larger, transforming into an ice blade that sliced through Baziush-hun's frigid chi and continued onward. The shocking speed of the ice blade caused Baziush-hun's expression to flicker. After making contact with the ice flower, his frigid adept power had been almost completely sucked away, and as the ice blade neared, the intense cold caused his blood to begin to freeze up. Thankfully, in addition to his Heaven Dao gold core, he also had his undying Heavenly King core, which vibrated as it stimulated his fleshly body power. As the ice blade neared, Baziush-hun howled and clenched his right hand into a fist, which he punched out at the ice blade. A huge boom could be heard as the ice blade shattered into bits. At the same time, Baziush-hun coughed up a mouthful of blood and then looked down to see the flesh of his right hand shredded and bleeding. However, now was not the time to retreat. Instead, he blurred into motion, heading directly toward the statue of Gongsun, unleashing more frigid chi and using his frigid shadows to perform a minor teleportation. Shockingly, he appeared right in front of the expressionless Gongsun, whereupon his left leg swept out in a kick, backed by the full fleshly body power of his undying tendons. In the same moment that Baziush-hun attacked, Gongsun, seemingly ignoring him, performed an incantation gesture with her left hand and then pushed her finger down onto her forehead. As she did, a burst of frigid chi emerged that vastly surpassed that from before. Everything around her instantly froze, and at the same time, an enormous ice hand materialized behind her, which shot toward Baziush-hun as if to grab him. Baziush-hun had already sent his foot flying through the air with explosive power, so it smashed into the ice hand, destroying most of it. However, the hand still continued onward to slam into Baziush-hun. Baziush-hun was sent spinning backward, blood spraying from his mouth. And yet, His eyes shone with ferocious light as he completely ignored his own injuries and once again summoned a frigid shadow as he prepared to teleport to safety. As he did, his expression flickered as he realized that Gong Sunwaner's frigid chi had formed something like a sealing power, a barrier that obstructed his ability to change locations with his frigid shadows. As for the mostly destroyed ice hand, it quickly repaired itself, and then began to grow larger. In the blink of an eye, it was fully 300 meters tall, and once again began to rumble through the air toward Baziush-hun. Up to this point, Baziush-hun hadn't even been able to get close to Gong Sunwaner, who currently stood behind the ice hand, staring at him coldly. The ice hand closed in, growing larger the entire time, until it was more than 3,000 meters tall. Baziush-hun's pupils constricted as he realized that he wasn't sure what to do at this point. For the entire time during this fight, he had been reacting, and had yet to take the initiative. If he couldn't turn things around, then he would surely meet defeat. So, you want to compete in terms of frigid chi? Fine, let's do it. Anxiety for the safety of Big Fatty Jong was the most important thing right now, so Baziush-hun knew that if he couldn't defeat the statue of Gong Sunwaner, he wouldn't get into the Violet Trial. Therefore, he took a deep breath and then drew upon a vast amount of frigid chi from his gold core, all of which he converged upon his right hand, causing it to turn a deep blue color. Then, he shoved his blue hand directly toward the ground. Frigid. Mountain. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the frigid chi exploded downward toward the ground, causing a mountain of ice to form, and freezing everything in the area. Even as the ice hand closed in, the mountain of ice rose up hundreds of meters into the air. Then, the two forces met. He was drawing upon so much frigid chi that his chi passageways were pulsing with pain, and yet, he didn't seem to notice. He was drawing upon virtually all of the frigid chi his gold core was capable of, completely regardless of the consequences. It almost seemed like an insane suicide attack. The ice mountain continued to grow rapidly, until it was also 3,000 meters tall. That was when the ice hand reached it. Detonate! Baziush-hun shouted, his eyes bloodshot. Boom! The ice hand shattered and the ice mountain exploded, sending a powerful shockwave out in all directions. Blood sprayed out of Baziush-hun's mouth as he was sent tumbling backward, and for the first time, the statue of Gong Sunwaner was harmed by Baziush-hun's seemingly insane attack. Popping sounds emanated out as a tremor ran through her. Shockingly, Gong Sunwaner's forehead split open, a crack that ran all the way down to her mouth, and was completely terrifying in appearance. The battle had only just begun, but had already reached a completely shocking level. Everyone watching outside was glued to the action, especially because of the fact that Gong Sunwaner had only recently become famous by breaking into the top 10. Furthermore, Baziush-hun's cultivation base was only in the mid-gold core stage, putting him at a clear disadvantage. Everyone watching the fight was completely shocked. Mid-gold core stage versus late gold core. This Baziush-hun has really been hiding his strength. He has frigid chi, and so does Gong Sunwaner. This battle is going to be determined by who has better control. I never thought that this Baziush-hun would get so far. All of the top 100 Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars who heard about the matter were moved, and instantly stopped whatever type of cultivation they were currently practicing to watch. Fights like this were not often seen, and in fact, even the superstars in the top 10 came out of their immortals' caves to observe. In the battlefield that was the blue trial by fire, Baziush-hun was gasping for breath as he stared at the statue of Gong Sunwaner. Gong Sunwaner had used frigid chi when he fought her back in the Spirit Stream sect, but her control of it in this battle was on a completely different level. She used it with a finesse that left Baziush-hun completely shocked. He wasn't sure what method she used to cultivate frigid chi, but however she did it, the results were astonishing, and seemed to surpass his own frigid adept powers. In addition to that, their cultivation bases were not on the same level. He was in the mid-gold core stage, and despite how close he was to a breakthrough, he was not in the late stage. As for Gong Sunwaner, considering the fluctuations of her cultivation base, it was obvious that she was in late core formation. It doesn't matter, he said, his eyes glittering with cold light. I have to win this fight. He had just used all of the frigid chi at his disposal in a near-suicidal attack, which had resulted in wounding his opponent. As of now, the situation was different than before, and this was the moment in which he needed to clinch a victory. With that, he blurred into motion, using the fleshly body power of his left leg to shoot forward at incredible speed. As he did, he slapped his bag of holding, causing numerous flying swords to emerge, all of which had received multiple spirit enhancements. At the same time, a flash of black light could be seen, which was none other than his renegade dragon horn. The renegade dragon horn formed the center of a sword formation that descended like rain toward the statue of Gong Sunwaner. At the same time, Baziush-hun's right hand shot out in a gripping motion that flashed with black light, the throat-crushing grasp. However, Even as the sword formation descended onto Gongsun, the statue's eyes flashed and her right hand shot up, ripping into her own throat and then, in completely shocking fashion, dragging a spine-like bone sword out of her own body. As the bone sword appeared out in the open, a sound like that of countless screaming souls filled the entire blue trial by fire. As for Baziushun, he was instantly filled with a sense of profound and deadly danger. Everyone on the outside devolved into cries of shock and astonishment. At the same time, the statue of Gongsun didn't hesitate for even an instant before slashing the bone sword viciously toward Baziushun's incoming sword formation. The air shattered around the bone sword, as though heaven and earth were about to be destroyed. Everything in the area turned black, with the starkly white bone of the sword shone so brightly that it became the only light in the dimension. One by one, the flying swords began to shatter into pieces, until only the renegade dragon horn was left. Even that couldn't last for very long before cracks spread out on its surface and it began to collapse. In the final moment, it was sent spinning off to the side as the bone sword slashed toward Baziushun with shocking power. "So, this is your trump card, huh?" Baziushun murmured, his pupils constricting. At the same time, he slapped his bag of holding, causing a black scale to fly out and block the path of the bone sword. Simultaneously, he took a deep breath and then stretched both hands out wide before pushing them down toward the ground. Eyes shining with bizarre light, it was with the softest of voices that he said, "Water swamp." Chapter 437, The Kingdom crushes the statue. In the same moment that Baziushun spoke, the 30,000-meter frozen area suddenly filled with piercing pulses of moisture, water vapor so thick that it made it difficult to see. From a distance, that 30,000-meter area seemed to have been transformed into a frozen swamp. Baziushun's hair whipped around him as a burst of energy surged out from beneath his feet. At the same time, a brutal and wild aura erupted out, along with a roar that seemed to echo from ancient times, something that left all onlookers' minds spinning. Roar. It wasn't just the cultivators watching the fight who heard the sound, even cultivators in other areas could hear the echoing cry of some beast. Disciples throughout the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect looked around with flickering expressions, and many of them even cried out in alarm. "What was that? Did you guys hear that? What type of beast makes a sound like that? Question mark. Heavens. Even though we're outside of the trial by fire, we can still hear it. What kind of divine ability does that?" Meanwhile, on Starry Quarter Rainbow, there was a bright red mountain that rose high into the sky. At the top of the mountain was a young woman with hair like fire, sitting there meditating. She was very beautiful, and seemed to be surrounded by shapeless, invisible flames that would instantly eradicate anyone who got too close to her. Moments before, she had been completely focused on meditation, and hadn't been paying attention to the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials. But as soon as the beast roar echoed out, she detected it, and her expression flickered as she looked over in the direction of Myriad Star Rainbow. And here I thought Gongsun would be the only one to make it onto the violet portion of the rainbow before the soul hunting expedition. Apparently, I was wrong. That young woman occupied third place among the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, Chen Yushan. She wasn't the only one who noticed what was happening. In a deep cistern on Polarity Quarter Rainbow was a bare-chested young man with thin lips and cold eyes. He seemed like the completely merciless type, and was currently fighting a fierce battle with a host of vengeful souls. Despite the fierce attacks of the souls, they were being efficiently exterminated by the young man. As soon as the roar echoed out, he stopped in place and looked up, his eyes shining with mysterious light. "It doesn't matter how many people get onto the violet portion of the rainbow. When the soul hunting expedition begins, I'll kill anyone who gets in my way." This young man was one of the top superstars in the sect, who ranked even higher than Chen Yushan. He occupied second place, and was known by the Taoist name Heretic. Considering that the roar was so powerful even people outside of the trial heard it, there was little need to mention how it affected the statue of Gongsun. Her eyes began to shine brightly, and instead of backing up, she propelled the bone sword toward Baziushun with even greater speed than before. As it pierced through the air, it emitted ear-splitting whistling sounds. Meanwhile, Baziushun's murderous aura skyrocketed as he shoved his hands high into the air and shouted, "Kingdom!" Ear-splitting rumbling sounds spread out as the entire 30,000-meter area turned into a huge, watery swamp. Then, an indescribably large spike rose up like a mountain out of the ground, filling the entire world. Beneath the enormous spike, it was possible to see black, scaled skin. In addition, there were more spikes spreading out all over the creature below. The 30,000-meter area was actually like a window, allowing only a glimpse at the shockingly large beast beneath. As soon as the first huge spike appeared, it smashed into the statue of Gongsun, causing indescribable rumbling sounds to echo out. Everyone watching the scene gasped, and as for those who ranked higher in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, they seemed to be the most shocked of all. That was especially true of Chen Yushan and Heretic, both of whom looked on with widening eyes. Deafening rumbling sounds filled the entire blue trial by fire, sounds which surpassed heavenly thunder. It was almost like two continents colliding, releasing a destructive shockwave that instantly shattered Gong Sunwaner's bone sword into countless fragments. At the same time, her statue dimmed and was covered with countless cracks, as though it might collapse at any moment as she sped backward in retreat. However, her bone sword was by no means ordinary in any way. Despite its physical form having been destroyed, its sword chi still existed, and it actually pierced all the way through the huge bone spike to Baziush-hun. This was the first time anyone had ever pierced his water swamp kingdom, and the sword chi moved so quickly that he had no time to evade it. When the sword chi hit him, blood sprayed out of his mouth, and his entire body was racked with pain. Whether it was his bones or his flesh, he felt like he was about to explode, and he tumbled backward like a kite with its string cut. Apparently, these two opponents were evenly matched, and had just seriously injured each other. Everyone on the outside felt their hearts being battered by waves of shock. Not only were they completely shaken by Baziush-hun's magical technique, but they were filled with fervor from being able to watch this most ultimate of core formation battles. It was easy to imagine how, even if Baziush-hun ended up losing in the end, he would still become quite the center of attention. Both of them are almost on the same level as nascent soul experts. Gong Sunwaner is already in the late core formation stage, but this Baziush-hun is only in mid-core formation. I asked around, and apparently Baziush-hun is from the river-defying sect in the Middle Reaches, and so is Gong Sunwaner. Heavens! I can't believe the river-defying sect is so incredible. Both of the hostages they sent are completely heaven-defying. As everyone discussed the events playing out, back inside the blue trial by fire, the cracked statue of Gong Sunwaner looked up, her eyes shining with cold light. Then she reached up and placed her palm onto her forehead. A pop could be heard as her forehead collapsed, and more cracks spread out over her body. However, by opening her forehead, she apparently drew on the truly frigid coldness of her life essence, which erupted out with utter madness. As the frigid chi spread out, cracking sounds could be heard, and everything around the Gong Sunwaner statue was frozen. Within the blink of an eye, she transformed into an enormous ice giant, dozens of meters tall. If all that happened was that she became an ice giant, it might not have been a big deal. However, as she grew in size, a frigid chi began to swirl around her that seemed lethally cold, dropping the temperature in the 30,000-meter area so rapidly that, in the blink of an eye, everything was completely frozen. The frigid chi was so powerful that even the air froze, and the land began to crack to pieces. In fact, the only sound to be heard in the dimension were the popping sounds of everything freezing up. Furthermore, Gong Sunwaner was only continuing to grow larger. Frigid extermination. Everyone on the outside was so shaken that even the nascent soul experts were watching the fight, some of whom recognized where Gong Sunwaner's frigid chi actually came from, leading to exclamations of astonishment. As more and more of the nascent soul cultivators picked up on the clues, their expressions flickered with shock. Even the sect leader of the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect emerged from his secluded meditation facilities to watch the fight. If they had such reactions, there was little need to even consider how everyone else was reacting. Within the blue trial by fire, Baziush-hun's face fell as he sensed the exterminating power of the frigid chi. He could tell that, within moments, he would be frozen solid, killed in body and soul. Damn it! How did Gong Sunwaner get frigid chi like this? In the critical moment, Baziush-hun looked around at everything rapidly freezing, and knew that he only had one option. Living Mountain Incantation. As soon as the words left his mouth, the images of two stone golems appeared, one in each of his eyes. At the same time, a stone golem began to take shape around him. After melding with the mountain, you become the mountain, and the mountain becomes you. Baziush-hun was no longer visible. Instead, what everyone saw was an enormous stone golem dozens of meters high. Instantly, the stone golem emitted an aura that would cause any core formation cultivator to be stricken with shock. Even the nascent soul cultivators were left gasping. As that energy surged out, it slammed into the frigid chi, resulting in a deafening explosion. Soon, cultivators on the outside recognized what it was that they were seeing, causing cries of astonishment to echo out. Even the nascent soul cultivators were shaken. The Living Mountain Incantation. Gong Sunwaner's frigid extermination had been shocking enough, but then the Living Mountain Incantation was thrown into the mix, leaving everyone thoroughly flabbergasted. I can't believe someone actually succeeded in cultivating the Living Mountain Incantation. This Baziush-hun is completely incredible. Even the sect leader had a very serious expression on his face. Meanwhile, outside of the ravine of endless mountains, Stone Mountain sat there on the boulder, his eyes shining with a strange light. Apparently, his smile was one of excitement. As of this moment, a huge ice giant was facing off against an enormous stone golem. The energy emanating off of the two caused the entire blue trial by fire to tremble violently. Die! Bazius Hun howled. Chapter 438, Cultivation Base Breakthrough. As soon as Bazius Hun shouted die, a scene of violent destruction played out in front of the eyes of all onlookers. Bazius Hun shot forward in a beam of blue light, drawing upon a living mountain incantation and leaping forward with the mountain shaking bash. The strength of the stone golem bolstered Bazius Hun's fleshly body, making it vastly more powerful than before, to a virtually indescribable degree. Furthermore, he moved so quickly that it almost seemed like a teleportation. He pierced through the frigid G, unleashing a series of sonic booms that crushed everything around him before appearing directly in front of Gong Sunwaner. The statue had already been seriously damaged, and of course, was only a statue, not the true Gong Sunwaner. As such, it was completely incapable of dodging or evading the attack. Instead, her hands flashed in a double-handed incantation gesture as she attempted to block the strike. Bazius Hun's eyes were bright red as he put everything on the line in this last-ditch effort. If he couldn't secure victory at this point, then not only would he lose his chance to advance to the Violet Trial, but he would also be unable to rescue Big Fatty Zhang. That was not an outcome he could accept. There was only one thought in his mind. I have to win. Howling, he closed in, using the stone golem's body to launch a spinning kick with his left leg, which slammed directly into the ice giant summoned by Gong Sunwaner's statue. The power of that kick was backed by the fleshly body power of the Undying Live Forever technique, as well as the Living Mountain incantation and the Mountain Shaking Bash. Furthermore, it also contained his Undying Hex. It was a devastatingly deadly attack. Rumbling sounds echoed out as the foot sailed through the air, causing the entire blue trial by fire to tremble. The statue of Gong Sunwaner attempted to use both arms to block the incoming left foot, but as soon as it made contact, the statue's arms began to collapse. Bazius Hun's foot smashed through them like a boulder crushing a drinking glass to land directly on the statue's chest. Almost instantly, the statue's chest began to cave in, and then cracks spread out in all directions. However, the statue wasn't dead yet. All Bazius Hun had managed to do so far was destroy an outer layer of ice shields. Although the statue was seriously damaged, it was still able to defend itself. However, as the statue fell back, Bazius Hun drew once again upon the power of the stone golem to launch into another mountain shaking bash, fueling it further with the power of his left leg. This time, he sent the stone golem's hand shooting out, its thumb and forefinger glittering with black light. It was none other than the throat-crushing grasp. Rumbling echoed out as the throat of the statue was crushed, and then the entire statue began to fall apart. The final move had come as fast as lightning, and was delivered with ruthless efficiency. In the blink of an eye, the ice giant was destroyed, and the statue shattered. As that happened, a beam of teleportation light shot down, which was none other than the entrance to the Violet Trial. Simultaneously, Bazius Hun's Living Mountain incantation faded away, and the stone golem vanished. Bazius Hun was revealed in person, his face ashen as he floated down to the ground. Clearly, he was having trouble standing, and even coughed up 3 consecutive mouthfuls of blood. Despite his seeming weakness, though, his eyes shone with a gleam of determination that left everyone in the audience completely shaken. He won? A mid-core formation cultivator fought someone in the late-core formation stage, and actually won? Heavens! He just beat the statue of Gong Sunwaner. Doesn't that mean that he qualifies to enter the Violet Trial? He is going to become the 10th superstar to be on the Violet portion of the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Sect Rainbow. Outside of the trials, everyone was devolving into a huge commotion. Nearly half of the entire Starry Sky Dow Polarity Sect was shaken to the core, even more so than when Gong Sunwaner had recently challenged the trials. An uproar was sweeping through the sect, and especially through Sky Quarter Rainbow, where Bazius Hun came from. The hubbub there was far more intense than in other locations. Back on that very rainbow, Sankei was standing outside of his Immortal's cave, his hands clenched tightly into fists. It was difficult to read his expression, but his heart was filled with bitterness. He simply could not bring himself to admit that he didn't measure up to Bazius Hun, but the endless succession of evidence had pushed him to the brink of collapse. Zubake, Master God Diviner, and Chen Manyao were all shaken deeply. Although all of them knew that Bazius Hun was no ordinary cultivator, never could they have imagined that he was this incredible. Gong Sunwaner was also on Sky Quarter Rainbow, sitting outside of her Immortal's cave on a boulder, looking up toward the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trials. She had just watched the entire fight play out between her statue and Bazius Hun, and at the moment, a strange expression could be seen on her face. In fact, when her statue collapsed, she actually smiled. So, Big Bro is as awesome as ever. She even clapped her hands softly, a mysterious light flickering in her eyes. Outside of Sky Quarter Rainbow were Chen Yushan and Heretic, both of whom were superstars and chosen from the top 3. They were completely shaken by the battle they had just witnessed. As for Chen Yushan, her eyes shone with a mysterious light, whereas Heretic simply snorted coldly. Although he didn't say anything, the arrogant look in his eyes couldn't have been clearer. Even nascent soul cultivators in the sect had been watching, and were moved by Bazius Hun's actions. As of this moment, it was correct to say that within the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, there wasn't a single person who didn't know Bazius Hun. However, even as everyone devolved into exclamations and discussion, someone suddenly cried out. No, wait. Look at Bazius Hun. He's starting to practice cultivation. In response, more people looked over and saw what was happening. Frigid Chi. Look at the Frigid Chi. Bazius Hun really was practicing cultivation, although it wasn't intentional. After Gongsun Wanner's statue was destroyed, Frigid Chi began to spread out from it and fill the blue trial by fire. And since it had nowhere else to go, it began to stream toward Bazius Hun. Whether Bazius Hun wanted it or not, the Frigid Chi began to pour into his body, sweeping through his Chi passageways and heading toward his Heaven Dao Gold Core. It was strong Frigid Chi, and in the blink of an eye, it transformed into a vortex with Bazius Hun at the center. As it rushed into his gold core, it filled it to 30% capacity, then 40%, 50%, 60%. As more Frigid Chi rushed into him, he trembled at the sensation of his cultivation base rising. Before, he had been at the peak of mid-core formation, but as of this moment, he was breaking through into late-core formation. It took only a short moment for the overall Frigid Chi in his gold core to reach 60%, and yet, it hadn't stopped. His gold core was made from 9 spiritual seas, 60% of which were now a world of intense coldness. And then, Bazius Hun shivered, threw his head back and let loose a long cry as his Frigid Chi reached 70%. The Frigid School will evolving incantation involved gathering Frigid Chi into the gold core, which meant that 30% was the peak of the early stage, and 60% was the peak of the mid stage. Earlier, his overall level of Frigid Chi had reached roughly 60%, but now, having reached 70%, intense rumbling sounds exploded within him as his cultivation base released shocking power. This was the late gold core stage. And things weren't over yet. More Frigid Chi poured into him, pushing his gold core Frigid Chi past 70% to 80%. When the final bit of Frigid Chi was sucked in, his gold core Frigid Chi capacity had reached 85%, and his cultivation base was still climbing. As of now, he was very close to reaching 100% capacity and being at the great circle of the gold core stage. As his cultivation base rose and his energy surged, the blue trial by fire shook violently, and on the outside, the star that represented Bazius Hun shone with blinding light. Everyone outside was completely shaken. This Bazius Hun, he actually just had a breakthrough. Late core formation. He just reached late core formation. He could fight late core formation when he was only in mid core formation. Now that he's in the late stage, doesn't that mean he could fight someone in the great circle? What good fortune. It's all because he cultivates a technique that uses Frigid Chi. By absorbing the excess Frigid Chi from Gongsun Wanner's statue, he was able to break through. Chapter 439, I only have a wish. Although it might not have seemed possible, the commotion outside grew even more chaotic. This second time in which Bazius Hun challenged the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials had involved him pulling off one miracle after another. First was the incredible speed with which he made it through the early trials, then was his victory over late core formation expert while he himself was only in the mid stage, and finally was his cultivation base breakthrough. Because of all those things, everyone outside was left reeling. After all, of the group that made up the 9 cultivators who were already in the violet portion of the rainbow, 8 were in the great circle, with Gongsun Wanner being the only one in late core formation. And yet now, someone else had joined, someone who had entered the group in the mid stage and then immediately risen to the late stage. As everyone discussed the matter, Bazius Hun shivered, and the Frigid Chi inside of him settled down, placing him firmly in late core formation. However, there was no time for him to probe his cultivation base. Instead, he shot toward the light of teleportation. Even as he did, numerous motes of light in the area swirled together to form another statue. It was a statue of Bazius Hun. When he stopped for a moment to look back at it, he saw that it resembled him perfectly, and its aura was very similar to his. However, the statue's expression was cold and blank as it stood there, completely unmoving. Bazius Hun took a deep breath. He knew that from now on, anyone who tried to get into the violet portion of the rainbow would have to fight his statue as the last part of their trial. After a moment, he looked away, headed into the teleportation light, and then vanished. Of course, the discussion among the audience didn't die down at all. The events which had unfolded on this day were things rarely ever seen, especially considering that there were now 10 extremely famous cultivators in the sect. It was a momentous, joyous occasion. Because Bazius-hun had made his breakthrough after the battle, that meant that anyone who tried to challenge that trial in the future would fight the mid-core formation version of him, not the late-stage Bazius-hun from after the victory. That statue represented a certain status in the sect. As long as it remained undefeated, no one would be able to enter the Violet Trial, and as of this moment, more people were staring at the statue than there had been people watching Bazius-hun himself. As for Bazius-hun, when he stepped into the teleportation light, he vanished, disappearing from the Blue Trial by fire and reappearing within the Violet Trial. Meanwhile, on the violet portion of the rainbow, a 10th star had appeared, and all the eyes that had been focusing on the statue shifted over to look at it. Although no one could see what was happening with Bazius-hun now, everyone was wondering. The mere fact that no one knew what was going on in the Violet Trial made the entire scenario more mysterious. That added level of mystery made everyone want more than ever to know what would happen next. In a short few months, 2 people had reached the violet portion of the rainbow, and the mere thought of what happened inside that Violet Trial was a motivating force for many other cultivators. As such thoughts filled the minds of all present, Bazius-hun appeared within the very Violet Trial that no one else could see, to find himself in a dimension that was different from all of the other trials by fire. Stretching out in front of him was a river, upon whose bank he stood. A blank look could be seen in his eyes, as though he had forgotten something. Furthermore, as he looked around, he got the sensation that nothing around him was real. What did I forget? He thought in surprise, sitting down on the riverbank to think. However, even after some time passed, the only thing he could remember was his name. All of his other memories seemed to have disappeared. The confusion in his eyes grew deeper. His original plan upon entering the light of teleportation had been to abandon the Starry Sky Dow Polarity Superstars trial as soon as he entered the next stage. After all, by that point, his goal would have been met, and he could request the power of a Deva to save Big Fatty Jong. Time was of the essence. However, as soon as he entered the mysterious Violet Trial by fire, he couldn't remember any of that. No, he murmured, I remember that there was something important I needed to do. Frowning, he tried harder to think back to whatever it was that he'd forgotten, and it was in that moment that he suddenly heard someone singing. The voice rose and fell, making the lyrics of the song impossible to make out. However, the person singing seemed old, ancient even. A moment later, a lonely boat appeared on the river. An old man sat in the boat, wearing a white bamboo hat, and pushing the boat along with a long bamboo pole. Upon nearing the bank, he looked up, revealing a face wrinkled with age. Smiling, he said, "Is your heart unsettled?" Bazius-hun looked up at the old man and the boat. Feeling confused, he replied, "I feel like I've forgotten something." "Everyone forgets things sometimes," the old man said with a smile. "Why don't you come aboard and listen to my ballad? Perhaps that will help you remember whatever it is you've forgotten." Bazius-hun sat there quietly for a moment, then rose to his feet and hopped into the boat. With that, the old man pushed on the bamboo pole, and the boat once again began to move down the river. As Bazius-hun sat there in the lonely boat, the old man began to sing. Strangely, no matter how closely Bazius-hun paid attention, he was unable to make out any of the words the old man sang. After a moment, he couldn't hold back from asking, "What are you singing?" "A folk song," the old man replied. Bazius-hun listened for a bit longer, then asked, "Does it have a name?" "It doesn't." Smiling, the old man continued, "It's a ballad, the end of which no one will ever hear. 9 other people came before you, and none of them listened to the entire song. The first person listened to it for the longest, but gave up eventually." With that, he continued singing. Bazius-hun sat there silently, both listening and also trying to recall what it was that he had forgotten. The water in the river was by no means still, waves rolled back and forth, and after a bit of time, a rather large one hit the side of the boat. As Bazius-hun swayed back and forth with the rocking of the boat, his mind stirred, and suddenly, he remembered something. He was in a room with his father, who was gripping his hand tightly as he said, "Zius-hun, you have to keep on living." A tremor ran through Bazius-hun as that memory sparked a fire which raged through his mind, causing his memories to flood back into him with mountain-toppling, sea-draining power. "I have to save eldest brother," he thought, shivering as he remembered everything from before. He suddenly stood up, whereupon the boat vanished, along with the river. The entire room around him was now completely empty. In front of him was the old man, though, who turned and looked at Bazius-hun, eyes sparkling with bizarre, mysterious light. "Do you see clearly now?" the old man asked. "Huh?" Bazius-hun said. "Oh. I don't want to participate in this trial by fire. I need to save someone." Now that he had regained his memories, this trial seemed even stranger than before. The old man looked at him for a long moment, and then repeated, "Do you see clearly now?" Hun was starting to get a bit angry. However, he only got one word out of his mouth before the old man shook his head and interrupted with a sigh. Fine, I know what you're thinking. Get into the Violet trial, and you can ask for a boon from the sect. As long as it's not too excessive, your wish will be granted. For example, your hostage status can be removed. I want the power of a deva. Hun said immediately. The old man nodded. After you leave, someone will deliver it to you. With that, he waved his hand, causing a vortex to spring up in the void, which began to tug Hun toward it. Just before going through the exit, Hun stopped and looked back at the old man, who was walking away from him into the void. Just now, Hun said, you asked if I could see something clearly. What were you talking about? The old man didn't look back. Voice cool, he replied, your Dao. Hun was confused. The old man continued to walk away, and as Hun sank into the exit, he called out, I'm not sure what my Dao is, but I do have a wish, and that's to live forever. The old man stopped walking, looked back, and smiled. That's your Dao. Rumbling sounds echoed out, and Hun vanished, to appear moments later outside of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars trials. The first thing that met him was the sound of numerous discussions, shortly after which, his vision grew clear. Almost immediately, he caught sight of countless cultivators looking at him with envy and respect. At the same time, a solemn voice spoke out from the sect leader's portion of Myriad Star Rainbow. Hostage Hun of the River-Defying Sect, your request has been granted. You will be bestowed with the power of a deva. A bright beam of light shot down from the sky to appear in front of Hun in the shape of a crystalline leaf that pulsed with incredible power. Everyone in the area felt incredible pressure weighing down onto them, making it hard to even breathe, almost as if their cultivation bases were being suppressed. Shockingly, that leaf contained Wu-type deva power. Furthermore, it was a full portion of power, not just a tiny scrap. Chapter 440, The Extraordinary River-Defying Sect. When Hun appeared outside of the trials, and the sect leader's voice echoed out, everyone who had been watching his performance was left completely shaken. It only took moments for countless fervent gazes to be turned in Hun's direction. Normally speaking, he would have given everyone an opportunity to approach and offer words of praise. But he was in no mood for that now. As soon as he had that power of a deva, he shot into the sky, transforming into a beam of light that sped directly toward the teleportation portal. He had no idea how much time had passed, and anxiously wished to get back to the Hall of Devil Slayers on Sky Quarter Rainbow to save Big Fatty Jong. As he left, numerous discussions broke out amongst the audience. Hun was now listed among the absolute most high-level disciples within the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Sect. He was in the top 10. Although no one was sure of what he had experienced within the Violet trial, they did know that the Violet portion of the rainbow now had a 10th star. It was easy to imagine how, in the days to come, Hun's name would continue to rise to unprecedented heights within the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Sect. However, Hun was not in the mood to revel in the glory of his achievement. He pushed forward with all the speed he could muster until he was at the teleportation portal, where he vanished, to reappear moments later on Sky Quarter Rainbow. As soon as he stepped off of the teleportation portal there, he saw numerous Sky Quarter Rainbow cultivators gathered, looking at him with expressions of awe as they called out greetings. Greetings, Elder Brother Bay. Hun was too nervous about Big Fatty Jong to do more than simply nod in response, and then hurry on his way. Considering he was now in late core formation, he could move faster than ever as he shot off in a beam of light. Literally nothing could have blocked his path, although no one attempted to do so, not even when he passed directly through some of the other 10 halls. Because he was in the top 10 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, he had a special place in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Sect, as well as special privileges. Thus, he arrived at the Hall of Devil Slayers in less time than it takes an incense stick to burn. Instantly, numerous cultivators emerged to offer formal greetings, their faces filled with respect. Back before he had challenged the trials, everyone in the Hall of Devil Slayers had only pretended to respect him, and secretly scorned him for relying on a powerful backer to become important. Some of them had changed their tune a bit after he got into the top 400. But now that his name was on the violet portion of the rainbow, everything had changed. Greetings, Elder Brother Bay. Elder Brother Bay. More and more people appeared, and more voices rang out. There were some people Hun recognized, including Master Cloud Dao, who was waiting outside the main temple. As soon as Master Cloud Dao caught sight of him, he clasped hands and bowed in deep and exaggerated fashion. Congratulations, Elder Brother Bay. Master God Diviner, Zubake, and Chen Manyao were also waiting outside of the main temple, and when they caught sight of Hun, excited expressions appeared on their faces. Hun nodded to everyone, then walked into the temple looking very serious. The first thing he saw was the gaunt, skeletal form of Big Fatty Zhang, sitting there cross-legged in the middle of the temple, a pained expression on his face. Clearly, his life force was so faint that it was almost non-existent, and a strong aura of death surrounded him. Had Feng Yao not been there the entire time bolstering him with his nascent soul cultivation base, Big Fatty Zhang would have long since slipped into death. Taoist Master, I've brought the power of a deva. Looking trepidatiously at Big Fatty Zhang, Bezier Shun quickly pulled out the wood-type leaf he had just received. Feng Yao looked up and made a grasping motion, causing the leaf to fly over and come to a rest above Big Fatty Zhang's head. Expression somber, Feng Yao performed an incantation gesture and pointed out at the leaf, which began to tremble and emit a greenish glow. At the same time, green strands of energy emerged from the leaf and began to bore into Big Fatty Zhang. Big Fatty Zhang shivered, and the look of pain on his face faded away. Almost immediately, a faint, ruddy glow could be seen on his cheeks, and the mist which surrounded him began to swirl back inside of him. Instead of spreading out in all directions like it had been, it was taking form inside his Danshan region. Seeing that, Bezier Shun's nervousness immediately began to fade. Finally, Feng Yao took a deep breath and rose to his feet. With the help of the power of a deva, your eldest brother's core formation should proceed smoothly from here on out. However, he did drain a lot of his life force. The process should take a full half-year before it's complete. He sighed. Fine. You can leave him here for me to watch over. Many thanks, Taoist Master. Bezier Shun said excitedly, clasping hands and bowing deeply. Then he looked over one more time to confirm that Big Fatty Zhang was safe, which was when he realized how exhausted he was. The fight with the statue of Gongsun Wanner had been a huge draw on both his cultivation base and his energy in general. Coupled with all the anxiety he had felt regarding Big Fatty Zhang, everything returned to hit him at once. Now that he was sure Big Fatty Zhang was safe, he left the temple and returned, not to his Immortal's Cave, but rather, one of the empty residences in the Hall of Devil Slayers, where he sat down to do some breathing exercises and recuperate. He rested for 3 days straight. During that time, the commotion which had begun 3 days before continued to sweep through the sect, and Bezier Shun's name grew more famous than ever. Soon, the details of his background became more commonly known. As such, the cultivators in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect came to know of the river-defying sect. After all, 2 of the top 10 Starry Sky Tao Polarity superstars were from the river-defying sect. This river-defying sect is extraordinary. It's hard to even wrap your mind around the fact that 2 river-defying sect hostages are in the top 10. I heard that when Bezier Shun came from the river-defying sect, he brought some Tao protectors with him. I bet those Tao protectors are incredible too. Slowly but surely, the identities of Bezier Shun's Tao protectors came to be known. Song K. Big Fatty Zhang. Zubekai. Master God Diviner. Chen Man Yao. Those 5 names gradually became the subject of much discussion. Zubekai didn't think much of the matter, and actually basked in the glory, whereas Song K had a hard time accepting it. In fact, on the 4th day, Song K left his Immortal's Cave and headed toward the Starry Sky Tao Polarity Superstars trials to prove that, although he might not be Bezier Shun's equal, he was still not far behind. Because he was one of Bezier Shun's Tao protectors, a lot of people paid attention to his run, and when he ended up being ranked within the 600s, it caused quite a stir. After Song K was Chen Man Yao, who placed around the same as Song K, neither very high nor very low. Master God Diviner didn't really want to go, but ended up being convinced, and after going all out, reaching a rank in the 900s. Zubekai hesitated about whether or not to go, and in the end, didn't dare to try. As far as he was concerned, if he couldn't get into the top 1000, then it would be too embarrassing to try. Zubekai didn't challenge the trials, but Song K, Chen Man Yao, and Master God Diviner all did, and it caused the name of the river-defying sect to rise to even greater heights. Eventually, the Peak Lord of Sky Quarter Rainbow personally sent down instructions to notify the river-defying sect of what had occurred, and to give them a bit of a reward. The reward itself didn't count for much, but the Peak Lord's attitude did. Furthermore, the performance of Bezier Shun and his Tao protectors ensured that the other 3 great sects in the Middle Reaches were even more hesitant than before to cause any problems for the river-defying sect. That was especially true because of how both Bezier Shun and Gongsun Wanner had reached the top 10. The other 3 sects were shocked, and immediately did their best to contact the river-defying sect and improve relations. In response to all of this, the patriarchs of the river-defying sect were very excited. Patriarch Frigid Sect threw his head back and laughed uproariously. Ah, Ziyashun. Wherever the kid goes, he becomes a star. Nothing can keep him down. The other disciples in the sect were overjoyed, especially Hu Xiaomai and Song Jun, as well as Bezier Shun's other friends. A month went by in which Bazius Hun's name continued to rise in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, to the point where literally everyone had heard of him, even the Devas. As for Big Fatty Zhang, he never awoke, but was in stable condition. He was no longer gaunt and skeletal, and the mist which surrounded him was slowly merging into his body. He had passed the moment of deadly crisis, and within a few months, would have formed his will core and stepped into core formation. Chapter 441, Soul Hunting Expedition. Everything was turning up, and Bazius Hun's mood was improving. Considering that, he now felt up to public appearances, and not just on Sky Quarter Rainbow. He went to the other rainbow districts as well, and the adulation he received left him feeling quite pleased. From what he could tell, he was almost at the ultimate peak of life. With the snap of a finger, Bazius Hun reduced the Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars to ashes. What a headache. Imposter Night Crypt, why do you think I'm so outstanding? Before leaving his immortal's cave, he would always pull out his copper mirror to examine himself, and when he was in a good mood, he would always ask this same question of Imposter Night Crypt. As for Imposter Night Crypt, every time he heard that question, he felt as if he were covered with goosebumps. And yet, he would still plaster on his smile and rack his brains to come up with some new words of flattery to please Bazius Hun. The little turtle always seemed to be busy, and never came out even once to say anything sarcastic. As such, Bazius Hun felt more wonderful than ever at being here in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. Unfortunately, good things never last forever. Another half a month went by, and a dharmic decree came down from the demigod Rainbow. It happened one morning when Bazius Hun emerged from his immortal's cave in very high spirits. He looked at the distant sea, felt the breeze caressing his face, and took a deep, contented breath. Patting his bag of holding, he produced his copper mirror. Clearing his throat, he said, "Hey Nightseas, come, explain to me why Lord Bay gets praised wherever he goes." Of course, he was just getting ready to go strolling about to receive some praise and adulation. Poor Imposter Night Crypt was on the verge of crying. Over the course of the last half-month, he had scraped the bottom of a barrel in his attempts to come up with new material, and his existence was now a torment that made life almost unbearable. "Master, please spare me," he groveled piteously. Bazius Hun was not very pleased by his reaction. Glaring, he was just about to respond when, all of a sudden, thunderous rumbling filled the air, causing everything to shake. Colors flashed in the sky, and a screaming wind kicked up. All of the rainbows were shaking, including the Deva Rainbow and Myriad Star Rainbow. Everyone from the Devas down to the Chi Condensation disciples were completely shaken, and no matter what they were doing at the moment, looked up with flickering expressions. Startled, Bazius Hun almost dropped his copper mirror as he looked up into the sky, astonishment and confusion playing out on his face. "What's going on?" A moment later, a profoundly dignified and ancient voice echoed out from the demigod Rainbow to fill the entire Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect. "A Heaven's Pan-Imperial decree has been issued, and a soul-hunting expedition will begin. In 1 month, the Starry Sky battleship will set sail for the Wildlands." Every single word spoken by that ancient voice almost seemed like natural law, causing all creation to fill with rumbling sounds, and all hearts to be shaken. As for Bazius Hun, he wasn't quite sure exactly what the voice was talking about. After all, he had only just entered the top 10 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity superstars, and didn't have a very complete understanding of how things worked for that group. However, as for everyone else who was in the top 100, they couldn't hold back their excitement upon hearing the announcement. The soul hunting expedition is finally going to happen. After this trial by fire, I'll definitely be able to step into the nascent soul stage. Ha ha ha. I've been waiting for this day for a long time now. On Starry Quarter Rainbow, atop a mountain peak covered with endless flames, was third-place holder Chen Yushan, who rose to her feet, her long hair swirling around her as her eyes burned with passion. The Soul Hunt. On Polarity Quarter Rainbow, second-place holder Heretic, one of the top superstars in the sect, was fighting a host of vengeful souls at the bottom of a deep cistern. Suddenly, a tremor passed through him, and his eyes began to shine with excitement. "It's finally happening, huh? Alright, Zhao Tanjiao, now we can finally see which of us will get a Deva soul, and then step into the nascent soul stage. It's definitely going to be me." As waves of astonishment swept through the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, somewhere outside of the sect, in a seemingly endless mountain range, a young man walked along beneath the trees. He was tall and slender, with a very cold expression, and a great sword strapped to his back. The reek of blood surrounded him as he walked, as if he had slaughtered countless enemies on his journey. Shockingly, he held a head in his hand. It was the head of an old man, his expression twisted viciously, and emanating an aura that indicated his cultivation level when he had been alive, the nascent soul stage. As the young man strode through the trees, he suddenly stopped in place and produced a jade slip from his bag of holding. Upon looking at the information in the slip, his eyes shone with a gaze so bright and corrosive that the surrounding plants and vegetation began to wither and die. So, the soul hunting expedition that I've been waiting for is finally happening. The young man's gaze intensified, and the destructive effect on the plants and vegetation spread. In the blink of an eye, everything in an entire 3,000-meter area withered away into death. This young man was none other than the one-street placeholder among the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, Zhao Tanjiao. After the news about the soul-hunting expedition came down from the demigod Rainbow, the sect leader quickly sent out a number of orators, as did the peak lords from the 4 Rainbow districts. All sorts of information began to spread through the sect, until everyone was bubbling with gossip. After hearing some of the talk, Baziush-hun still wasn't completely sure of all the details, and quickly summoned Tsubakai. As soon as he stepped into Baziush-hun's Immortal's Cave, he said, "Junior Patriarch, this is something big. Very big." "Alright," Baziush-hun said nervously, "hurry up and explain exactly what this soul-hunting expedition is." Sounding very excited, Tsubakai said, "Junior Patriarch, I already got all the information. The soul-hunting expedition is basically good fortune for all core formation cultivators preparing to step into the nascent soul stage." "Huh?" Baziush-hun said, looking surprised. "Good fortune?" Based on some of the information he'd heard, the soul-hunting expedition, although not anything like a death sentence, was definitely very dangerous. "That's right." Tsubakai continued. "I just heard about it myself. If you want to break through from core formation into the nascent soul stage, you have to do it by one of 3 ways. First is by using a nascent soul pill, which is the mortal tier method. The second method is by using a 5-element stava beast soul, which is the earth tier method. Last is the most legendary of all, the heaven tier method, in which you use a 5-element stava soul. However, that final method is virtually impossible. If you stay inside the sect, even reaching the earth tier nascent soul stage is quite difficult. After all, Deva beast souls are just as rare as Deva souls. However, things are different in the wildlands. Supposedly, there is a river in the wildlands which is similar to the Heavenspan River. The difference is that it is a river that the living cannot see. It's an underworld river, a path that all the souls from the entire world travel after death. Because of that, souls are a lot more common in the wildlands. In fact, they're everywhere. Within that literally uncountable number of souls, it's possible to find, not only Deva beast souls, but also Deva souls. And that's why the place is the ultimate place of good fortune for core formation cultivators. From the level of Tsubakai's excitement as he spoke, it was evident that he would leap at the chance to be qualified to go the wildlands. The wildlands. Baziush-hun said. The truth was that Baziush-hun knew a bit more about the wildlands than Tsubakai did, and the first thing that popped into his mind was that something seemed strange about this trial by fire. It was definitely not as simple as it sounded. After all, there weren't just souls in the wildlands, there were also cultivators. This soul-hunting expedition is going to happen in the wildlands. That ancient battleship is going to sail across the Heavenspan Sea toward another path which leads to the wildlands. Tsubakai pointed to the huge, mysterious battleship at the top of the waterfall. Baziush-hun looked up at the ship, and was shaken as he recalled something Chen Manyao had said back when she had been trying to convince him to let her join his group of Dao protectors. She had mentioned this very ship, and Baziush-hun now realized that she must have known about this soul-hunting expedition all along. The only people who qualify to go to the wildlands on this 10-year-long trial by fire are famous people among the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars. Congratulations, Junior Patriarch. It's hard to say for sure, but when you come back, you'll probably be a nascent soul cultivator. The ultimate goal of the trial by fire is to acquire a Deva soul. Anyone who does can bring it back to the sect and exchange it for a complete set of 5-element Deva beast souls. Even if you can't get a Deva soul, and only get a single Deva beast soul, you can still bring it back to the sect and trade it for a precious nascent soul pill. Chapter 442, Dueling Fi appears in person. I even heard that a lot of the top 100 Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars could have reached the nascent soul stage years ago, but have been suppressing themselves just so that they could join this soul-hunting expedition. Beaming with delight, Tsubakai continued to explain everything he'd learned. The more Baziush-hun heard, the grimmer his expression got. In the end, he felt deeply conflicted about the whole trial by fire. Finally, he made a decision. I definitely can't go, he thought. Absolutely not. Suddenly, Tsubakai's face lit up as if he had just remembered something. Looking shocked and incredulous, he said, "Oh right, there's something else you definitely don't know about, Junior Patriarch, something huge. Heavens. Even I had never heard a whisper about this. It was only after word of the trial by fire began to spread that I caught wind of it. Junior Patriarch, did you know that the Starry Sky Polarity sect is a lot bigger than you ever imagined? That's right. What you see around us here is not the entirety of the Starry Sky Polarity sect. There are other parts of the sect that are located within the Great Wall. Even Zubakai was still shaking from this shocking news, despite having heard it some time ago. The Great Wall? Baziush-hun said, a look of shock appearing on his face. The 4 sections of the Great Wall all connect eventually, creating a huge circle that protects the heavens Pansy, and all the sects too. Everything outside the Great Wall is the true wildlands. According to what I heard, everyone who takes part in the soul hunting expedition has to actually go outside of the Great Wall, on more than one occasion. As he talked, and brought together all of the various bits of information he had learned, Zubakai's expression slowly changed as he realized that, clearly, this Great Wall was separating 2 opposing forces. His voice gradually faded away, and his pupils constricted. You get it now, don't you? Baziush-hun said, scowling a bit as he looked at Zubakai. It can't be like that, can it? Zubakai said quietly. Maybe the area outside the Great Wall is just really dangerous. That's why they built it, to keep out the danger? Or maybe to keep all the souls from getting inside? Zubakai was feeling more and more like there was something mysterious going on, and he shivered, almost like an instinctual reaction to piecing together some puzzle. Not daring to think about the subject too deeply, Zubakai left in somewhat of a daze. As for Baziush-hun, he was scowling on the verge of tears. Based on the sensation of danger he was feeling, he knew that he had to think of a way to make sure he didn't go on the soul-hunting expedition. And yet, before he could, the orders of the sect leader and the Peak Lord spread out to all of the disciples. All Starry Sky Polarity superstars in the top 1,000 are required to join the soul-hunting expedition. It will last for 10 years, during which time you must go outside of the Great Wall at least 3 times. After the 10 years are up, you may return to the sect headquarters. Almost immediately, Baziush-hun was filled with a sense of foreboding. I'm finished, he moaned. Kaput. After all, this was not the river-defying sect, where he had so much sway with the patriarchs. He had only just reached the violet portion of the rainbow, and made a name for himself. As far as he could tell, he had no options available. This mission is going to be way too dangerous. The Starry Sky Polarity sect's so-called Great Wall is obviously there to keep out, not just the souls, but the traitors. After much thought, he decided to go to Chen Man Yao's Immortal's Cave to see if he could get some answers. Chen Man Yao didn't seem surprised at all to see him. After inviting him inside, they sat down, and an enigmatic smile appeared on her face. Baziush-hun cleared his throat and said, So, Man Yao, do you think I've treated you well here in the Starry Sky Polarity sect? You still haven't fulfilled that one promise from early on. Chen Man Yao covered her mouth and chuckled lightly. She was beautiful to begin with, but whenever she laughed or smiled, she seemed even more attractive. Don't worry, Junior Patriarch. Even in the wildlands outside of the Great Wall, you'll be safe as long as you're careful. Furthermore, this trip will definitely be an opportunity for good fortune. You never know. You might even end up with a Deva soul. Although, if you're really worried, you could always join our side. Baziush-hun sighed. Avoiding the topic she had brought up, he said. Ah, come on, how many Deva souls can there be in the world? After all the years that have passed, surely any that did exist have already been found. There are some things you probably don't understand completely, Junior Patriarch. The wildlands are special. The underworld river there contains a huge amount of souls. Throughout all the countless years that have passed since the Heavenspan realm came to exist, all the souls which have died end up in that river, and build up in the wildlands. Even if there were fewer Deva souls than there would still be some. They build up? He murmured, a look of shock appearing on his face. I don't know the details, and in fact, I don't even know why it happens that way. But what I do know is that the wildlands has been building up souls for years and years. Chen Man Yao seemed very earnest in her words. There isn't any spiritual energy in the wildlands, Baziush-hun pointed out. So how do the people there practice cultivation? There is no spiritual energy, Chen Man Yao said softly. But there are plenty of souls. Hunt them, absorb them, and that is how you can practice cultivation. After a long moment passed, Chen Man Yao once again brought up the subject of Baziush-hun joining the wildlanders. This time, Baziush-hun didn't refuse outright. He thought about it for a bit, then turned and left. As he walked along the paths of Sky Quarter Rainbow, he heaved sighs left and right. His intuition was telling him that this soul-hunting expedition was going to be very dangerous. And yet, there was nothing he could do to get out of it. Therefore, he had no choice but to accept his fate. Face grim, he flew back to his Immortal's Cave. Along the way, quite a few cultivators noticed him and called out respectful greetings. However, he was no longer in the mood to revel in their attention. Evening was falling, and the light of the setting sun reflecting off of the golden waters of the heavens Pansy made for quite a beautiful scene. Bazish-hun looked out at it, then sighed, thinking about how he already had a Deva soul. If he really ran out of options, he could always find a safe place inside the Great Wall to hide for 10 years, then come back to the sect, trade it for a set of Deva beast souls, and then step into the nascent soul stage. Feeling sorry for himself, and still wrestling with what decision to make, he walked up to his immortal's cave and prepared to enter. However, just before stepping inside, he stopped and looked up, and his eyes flashed. Unexpectedly, someone was waiting for him inside of his immortal's cave. He immediately drew upon the power of his cultivation base, waving his finger to cause the front door to swing open, revealing a young woman, standing there with her back to him. As soon as he saw her back, a tremor ran through him, and he began to breathe heavily. "You!" As soon as the words escaped his lips, the young woman slowly turned, revealing a face that shocked Bazish-hun down to the core. "Zish-hun," she said softly, her eyes glistening. "Du Lingfei," he said. He had often thought about what it would be like to see Du Lingfei again. As of this moment, he realized that it was not as shocking of an event as he had imagined. Although it had come like a bolt out of the blue, deep in his heart, he had long since prepared for their reunion. His eyes flickered with complicated emotions as a quiet moment passed. All of a sudden, he thought about how the Sky Quarter Peak Lord had treated him, and how Feng Yaot had taken him under his wing. During the entire time he had been in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, it had always seemed like someone was out there, secretly watching out for him. Although he had had his various speculations, now that he saw Du Lingfei standing there, everything made complete sense. Her expression complex and filled with melancholy, she said, "Zish-hun, I'm sorry for was that you in the Bloodstream sect?" He interrupted, speaking his words slowly and with force. "Yes," she replied without the slightest hesitation. Staring at her, he continued with more questions. "Were you an agent of some sort? Why? What were you doing in the Spirit Stream sect and the Bloodstream sect? And what are you doing here?" Chapter 443, Boarding. "I had no choice in the matter," she said bitterly, shaking her head. The pain visible in her smile softened Bazish-hun's heart a bit. Lowering his voice, he said, "Who exactly are you? Where are you from?" After a long moment of silence, she took a deep breath and said, "I'm from the heavens Pansy, and that's all I can say. Don't ask any more about it." Shaken, Bazish-hun remained silent. Outside, the sun was setting, and the sky was growing dark. It was quiet in the Immortal's cave, with the only sound being their breathing. Eventually, the Immortal's cave grew dark, and finally, Bazish-hun decided to ask another question, a question which had been lurking in his heart for a long time, a question which he very much wanted to know the answer to. Back in the Luotian Mountains, the tears you shed, were they real, or just for show? She didn't directly answer his question. Instead, she extended her right hand, within which appeared a violet tongue of flame. As it burned, it released a shocking energy, something that surpassed the energy of the leaf Bazish-hun had received that contained the power of a Deva. This made it seem like a Deva was actually standing right there with them. Furthermore, within the burning violet flames was a soul. Looking up at him, she spoke in a voice that was almost a murmur. "Do you think this Deva soul is real, or just for show?" To see Du Lingfei holding a Deva soul shocked Bazish-hun to the core. He also had a Deva soul, the wood-type soul that Patriarch Frigid Sect had given him. He had been shocked when he was told how valuable Deva souls were, but back then, their true value had been some abstract to him. Now, on the verge of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect sending numerous disciples on a soul-hunting expedition, he was more acutely aware than ever of how valuable Deva souls were. Anyone who wanted to achieve a heaven-down ascent soul needed 5 Deva souls, each one a different type. When it came to Deva beast souls, any single Deva soul could be traded for a set of 5 of them. From that alone, it was easy to calculate how astronomically valuable any Deva soul was. Before Bazish-hun could even respond to her words, Du Lingfei sent the fire-type soul floating over to Bazish-hun. As it did, her body began to slowly fade away. The entire time, her gaze was soft as she looked at Bazish-hun, and seemed to be filled with regret and sentiment. The Wildlands is a dangerous place. You should make sure not to do anything risky. When you get back, trade that Deva soul for a set of Deva beast souls. At that time, I'll explain everything." With that, she disappeared. Bazish-hun simply stood there the entire time, declining to speak. After she faded away, he closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them and reached out to take the fire-type Deva soul. Then he sat down cross-legged to think, although he wasn't sure about what. Time passed. Half a month flew by, and the day of the trial by fire grew closer. Eventually, Baziushun had no choice but to rouse himself and start preparing. He got very busy, both concocting pills, performing spirit enhancements, and doing everything else he could to get himself in peak condition. On the day before the trial by fire was to begin, he emerged from his immortal's cave and went to the Hall of Devil Slayers to say goodbye to Big Fatty Zhang. Big Fatty Zhang had not yet awoken, but had recovered significantly. His aura was stable, and his cultivation base was growing stronger. Within 2 or 3 months, he would have successfully reached core formation. He sat down in front of Big Fatty Zhang, feeling more than ever like he couldn't bear to leave. Eldest brother. The next time we see each other will be in 10 years. I really wish I didn't have to leave. He spoke many more words from his heart, until the sun began to set. Worried that he might be disturbing Big Fatty Zhang's core formation, he left the temple and went to see Feng Yaod. Clasping hands deeply, he offered sincere thanks for the help Feng Yaod had given him. Maintain a calm heart. That's the best thing you can do, Feng Yaod said. If you want to repay me, then come back as a nascent soul cultivator. As far as your eldest brother is concerned, I guarantee to watch over him. Clasping hands and bowing again, Baziushun again expressed his gratitude. Of course, Zubakai would not be going along, so he went to visit and leave some parting instructions. Finally, he gritted his teeth and went back to his immortal's cave, where he mediated through the night. Nothing happened during the night, and the sun rose into a cloudless sky. The day had come in which the trial by fire was to begin. The thunderous sound of booming drums filled the entire sect, prompting all of the cultivators to emerge excited and filled with anticipation. Baziushun had packed his bags, and looked very sad as he walked out the door of his immortal's cave and stood there trembling. Almost in the same instant, a huge rumbling sound rippled out from the direction of the sea down below. It almost sounded like the roaring of a giant, and it caused huge waves to roll across the surface of the sea as the enormous, ancient battleship thrummed with power. As the ship powered up, the mysterious, ghost-like entities inside of it began to howl and scream, and eventually fled in terror. Apparently, the will of the battleship itself was awakening, causing its energy to rise to the point where even the rainbows that made up the starry sky polarity sect were shaking. Baziushun took a deep breath as he stared at the enormous battleship. It was fully 300,000 meters long, pitch black, and in very bad condition. It seemed ancient beyond belief, and there was something ferocious about it that made it seem like the type of ship no one would dare to even approach. The corpse of some enormous, rotting beast had been lashed to its prow, something so disfigured it was impossible to determine what it was. However, it was clearly humanoid, and had once been 30,000 meters tall. The surface of the battleship was covered with countless spikes, all of which glowed with black light. It was easy to imagine powerful magical techniques being unleashed by means of those spikes, and how they would surely cause heaven and earth to tremble. The ship had 5 decks, some parts of which were apparently locked down with magical seals. Even as Baziushun was studying the battleship, it began to move, releasing explosive power that caused huge waves to roll out across the surface of the golden heavens Pansea. Even as the battleship stirred into motion, an old man flew off of the Deva rainbow. He was ancient, with flowing white hair that made him look like a transcendent being. In addition, he had a third eye on his forehead, giving him a very intimidating appearance. I am Chen Hishan, and I will lead you on the journey to the sect outpost, where the soul hunting expedition will be held. The journey across the sea will be a long one, more than half a year. All of you, board the ship immediately and prepare for departure. The three-eyed old man's final words struck the hearts of the listeners like lightning. Immediately, the top 1,000 starry sky polarity superstars from all 4 of the rainbow districts began to fly at top speed toward the battleship. As for Baziushun, he gritted his teeth and decided that he had no choice but to throw caution to the wind. Howling at the top of his lungs, he joined the crowd flying down toward the battleship. Almost as soon as he took to flight, Baziushun could sense the intensely powerful spiritual energy from the heavens Pansea slamming into him like a hurricane. It was a blast that was difficult to endure despite the fact that he was a core formation cultivator. Everyone who was flying toward the ship trembled unsteadily for a moment before accelerating toward the ship again. Everyone was weighing each other up, trying to go along as fast as possible through the battering spiritual energy to prove that they were better. One of the cultivators flying along was a young woman, who happened to take the lead by a wide margin, flying through the air like a ball of fire. She was Chen Yushan, and even as she closed in on the battleship and seemed moments away from stepping onto it, a cold snort echoed out as Heretic appeared. With a single step forward, he seemingly teleported, surpassing Chen Yushan to become the first person to step onto the ship. When Heretic used what appeared to be a divine ability of teleportation, the other cultivators were shocked, and Chen Yushan's eyes flickered with a flash of light. Even Baziushun sucked in a breath. By using his frigid shadows, he could perform minor teleportations, But what Heretic had done just now was completely different. Some of the people near Baziush-hun knew what it was they had just seen, and cried out in astonishment. That was the wind dash. Wind dash? Baziush-hun murmured, taken aback. Meanwhile, more cultivators were landing on the ship. Baziush-hun didn't go very quickly, and arrived within the first 100 or so. Almost immediately, the cultivators who landed on the ship edged away from each other. Clearly, the spirit of competition and rivalry was strong already, and one could only imagine how the situation would intensify when they got to the wildlands. As far as Baziush-hun was concerned, these people were all acting like fiends and monsters, so he quickly found an empty corner away from the crowd. What's with all the fighting and killing? He thought. These people. Can't they be more simple and pure like me? As he looked around, he eventually caught sight of Song Kei, Master God Diviner, and Chen Man Yao, which put him in a slightly better mood. However, it wasn't convenient to approach them at the moment. Off in the distance, he also noticed Gong Sunwaner, but when he thought about how strange she was, he ducked his head and avoided her gaze. Chapter 444, One Street Plays Zhao Tanjiao. As people continued to alight onto the ancient battleship, the three-eyed old man who had just emerged from the Deva Rainbow vanished, reappearing on the ship itself. Actually, he wasn't alone, he was joined by 5 nascent soul cultivators. It seemed as if the ship was just about to set sail, and yet, it was in that moment that a beam of light pierced through the air off in the distance, causing intense whistling sounds to echo through the air. How could I, Zhao Tanjiao, not participate in a major event such as this? It was a travel-worn young man, tall and slender, with long black hair and an icy cold aura. Shocking cultivation base fluctuations rolled off him that, despite being at the great circle of the core formation stage, felt even more profoundly powerful than that. He actually seemed like a nascent soul cultivator, and even though he wasn't quite in that level, as he approached, it was possible to see him occasionally blur to the point of being impossible to see. In truth, he was actually using a teleportation ability. Although he could only teleport for short distances, he was still only a core formation cultivator, which made him shocking to a level that surpassed even Heretic. It took only a few moments for the young man to reach the ship and land on the deck. As he stood there looking extremely lonely and proud, he was so different from the other cultivators that he was like a full moon in a field of stars. It's eldest brother. Heavens! Was eldest brother teleporting just now? Elder brother Heretic has his wind dash, but eldest brother was using real minor teleportations. Everyone in the crowd was looking at Zhao Tanjiao with expressions of reverence and respect. Hey, I can teleport too. Baziush-hun grumbled to himself in irritation. Although he wasn't fully convinced that Zhao Tanjiao was as amazing as the crowd apparently thought he was, he had to admit that he had skill. Furthermore, Baziush-hun could sense from the shocking fluctuations rolling off of him that he was stronger than the statue of Gong Sunwaner. The three-eyed Chen Hishan looked over at Zhao Tanjiao, his gaze soft, and yet his words sharp as he said, "And what reason do you have for being late and delaying things?" Clasping hands respectfully, Zhao Tanjiao said, "A year ago, a Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect disciple went missing, and in my efforts to find him, I found that these 3 freaks were responsible. They all fled in different directions, though, which cost me a bit of time." With that, he waved his sleeve, causing 3 heads to tumble down onto the deck. 2 of them were old men, and 1 was a middle-aged, but all of them had looks of lingering astonishment in their dead eyes. Based on the aura which still remained on them, all 3 had been nascent soul cultivators. When the surrounding disciples saw the 3 severed heads, they immediately began to call out in surprise. Patriarch Riverwater. Enlightened Sage Headwind. That's eccentric Flame Cloud. All 3 of them are nascent soul experts. Heavens. Eldest brother actually killed all 3 of them. He definitely deserves to be called eldest brother. Chen Yushan's pupils constricted, but she didn't say anything, and as for Heretic, his expression turned extremely grim, and he began to breathe heavily. Baziush-hun's eyes went wide, and he even gasped. Although he had known that Zhao Tanjiao was incredible before, at this point he could tell that he was definitely someone to avoid provoking at all costs. Looking at the 3 severed heads, he murmured to himself, whatever. I'll just have to deal with the fact that he has a slightly better name than me. One Chen Hishan nodded slightly and then, without another word, turned and headed to the highest deck on the ship, leaving the nascent soul cultivators behind to handle the rest of the disciples. One of the nascent soul cultivators, a middle-aged man, stepped forward with an expressionless face and said, "All of you are chosen of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, and are already somewhat familiar with this trial by fire. As such, we will not waste time with further explanations. However, there is one thing that I must make clear. Our voyage will take half a year, and during that time, you will live in quarters assigned to you based on your ranking in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars. The top 3 will be staying on deck too. Take your pick of the cabins there to be your own personal immortals caves. Those of you in 4th to 10th th place will stay on deck 3, where you will also have personal immortals caves within which to further your cultivation. Those of you who occupy 11th through 100 th place, you will stay on deck 4. Everyone after that will be on deck 5. Meanwhile, the ship had already begun to pick up speed as it moved across the surface of the sea. The crashing of waves against the sides of the ship was already audible. There was also a fierce wind, and a bit of sea spray that carried with it a powerful corrosive element that didn't harm the ship, but could be detrimental to cultivators if it touched them. Baziush-hun was a little nervous about that, but when he heard that everyone was being assigned to their quarters by means of their seniority in the ranking system, he was instantly enlivened. Now that's what I'm talking about, he thought. The people with higher rankings should have better accommodations. He already couldn't wait to see what his own Immortal's Cave would look like. Use these identity medallions as keys to your Immortal's Cave. Very well, you're all dismissed. With that, the middle-aged cultivator Nascent Soul spun on his heel and flew up to deck 1 with the other Nascent Soul experts, where they entered their own cabins to meditate. Now that the members of the senior generation were gone, the 1,000 other cultivators on board all dispersed, apparently eager to get off of the main deck and away from the powerful sea winds and corrosive spray. Zhao Tanjiao was the first to fly into motion, heading toward deck 2, with Chen Yushan and Heretic following close behind. Many of the other cultivators were a bit envious of the fact that those three got an entire deck to themselves, and yet, there was nothing that could be done about the matter. Baziush-hun didn't feel any irritation at all. He flew excitedly toward deck 3 with the other top 10 cultivators, including Gong Sunwaner. As for the other cultivators, they stood in their frustration and jealousy as they looked for their own immortals' caves. Baziush-hun was brimming with anticipation as he entered deck 3, and it was to his delight that he discovered that the entire deck had been renovated and fitted with only 7 cabins. Using the identity medallion he'd been given, he randomly selected one and branded the cabin to himself. Then he opened the door, stepped in, and looked around. Despite everything he had seen and done in his life so far, the sight which met his eyes was such that a gasp of shock escaped his lips. The cabin was huge, fully 300 meters from side to side. Furthermore, it wasn't actually a single cabin, but a suite of cabins, with 7 rooms, plus a pill concocting workstation. It contained everything a person could possibly need, and was incredibly luxurious. The floor wasn't made of wood as one might expect on a ship, but rather, green limestone that was suffused with spiritual power. The slabs were partially translucent, and inside of them could be seen swirling mists and clouds. Not only were they beautiful in appearance, but the spiritual energy that emanated from them could be used in cultivation. Furthermore, there were defensive spell formations built into the cabin that also provided complete soundproofing from the rumbling sounds that echoed outside. Even more extraordinary was that the cabin came with 6 puppet handmaidens, who were tasked with keeping the entire cabin in order at all times. On one side of the cabin were windows which provided a spectacular view of the golden sea outside, and there was also a balcony where one could enjoy the sea breeze if one wished, or even do a little fishing. Considering that it was currently about noontime, and the sun was shining brightly outside, Baziush-hun had the sudden impulse to go outside and soak in the warmth of the sun. The truth was that this cabin was so large that it could fit 100 people and still have room to spare. How luxurious. The fact that the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect will treat the higher-ups so much better is. It's wonderful. Taking a deep breath, he toured the cabin for a bit before sitting down cross-legged to do some breathing exercises. Time flashed by. During the 3 days which followed, Baziush-hun only continued to be more pleased with his accommodations. That was especially true when he found that every day, his puppet handmaidens would bring large quantities of spirit food. The amount of spirit food was so extensive that even after working hard, he couldn't consume it all. For him, life was even better than it had been in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect, and after eating, he would pat his belly and burp a bit, then lay down on a divan on the balcony to enjoy the sea breeze and the warmth of the sun. I'm in the top 10, and things are great. I wonder what the 3 rooms for Zhao Tanjiao and the others are like. How big are they? Thinking of Zhao Tanjiao caused Baziush-hun to suddenly be reminded of Song Ke and his other Dao protectors. At that point, he realized that, considering how large his room was, and how it was almost empty, he might as well enjoy it with some others. With that thought in mind, he excitedly rushed out of his cabin and headed to deck 4. The first thing he did was try to get an idea of what the cabins on deck 4 were like. Considering that there were always people coming in and out of one cabin or another, it didn't take long for him to get an answer. Deck 4 was much smaller than Deck 3, and each cabin was only a few dozen meters across. Even still, all of the cabins were single occupancy. However, when he got down to Deck 5, he saw that things were much more cramped. Chapter 445, Finally, I can get some real food. There were more than 100 cabins on Deck 5, none of them very large. Furthermore, not a single one was a single occupancy cabin. They were designed to house 5 people each. Although each person in each cabin had a separate living area which they could seal off with a spell formation, comparing these quarters to Bazius-Hun's accommodations was like comparing the earth to the heavens or the dirt to the clouds. After looking around for a while, he found Master God Diviner's cabin, where Master God Diviner sat looking around anxiously at his murky surroundings. The mere thought of spending half a year in conditions like this left him feeling very sullen. Just as he was about to become completely and utterly dispirited, Bazius-Hun appeared. "Junior Patriarch!" he cried. "All right," Bazius-Hun said with a wave of his hand, "you're coming with me. My place is plenty big." Master God Diviner was instantly elated, and to the envy of the other cultivators in the cabin, he hurried over to Bazius-Hun's side. Bazius-Hun cleared his throat, clasped his hands behind his back, and went about looking for his other friends. Eventually, he found Sankei who, by chance, was in the same cabin as Chen Manyao. As soon as Chen Manyao saw Bazius-Hun, she flashed him a radiant smile that couldn't have been more enticing. As for Sankei, his face was already about as grim as it could be. The past few days had been extremely annoying to him, considering that this was the first time he had ever stayed in a room with other people. Sighing, Bazius-Hun said, "Your aunt entrusted you to me, so how could I possibly stand idly by while you suffer? Why don't you come along with your uncle? I feast on spirit food every day, and have so much I can't even finish it all." Sankei's face darkened, and he glared at Bazius-Hun with gritted teeth. Of course, that made Bazius-Hun feel wonderful. He knew that Sankei didn't like him, and therefore, he didn't like Sankei very much, and would occasionally find opportunities to intentionally mock him. Just when Bazius-Hun was about to invite Chen Manyao to come with him, she spoke up. "I'll come with you, Big Bazius-Hun. I know you feast on spirit food every day, and have so much you can't finish it. I'll help you with that problem." Covering her smile with her hand, she glided over to Bazius-Hun's side, where she joined Master God Diviner. Seeing that Sankei wasn't even going to say a word, Bazius-Hun shook his head and turned to leave. However, he stopped at the door and looked back at Sankei. "You're really not coming? The spiritual energy in my cabin is much stronger than it is here, so your cultivation will proceed more quickly." Sankei really didn't want to go, but the truth was that he didn't know any of the other cultivators in his cabin on Deck 5. The idea of having to spend half a year with them darkened his mood even further. Then he heard Bazius-Hun mention that the spiritual energy in his cabin was strong, and would aid in cultivation. That finally gave Sankei the excuse he needed. "I have to surpass him," he thought. "A true man knows when to stand tall and when to submit. I can't let myself fall too far behind during this half year. The only reason I'm doing this is for cultivation purposes, and that's all." After convincing himself in this fashion, Sankei clenched his jaw and rose to his feet, face grimmer than ever as he walked over to Bazius-Hun's side. Bazius-Hun was a bit surprised, having been certain that Sankei wouldn't join him. Clasping Sankei's shoulder, he said, "That's the spirit. We're all one big family, right? Considering the relationship between myself and your aunt, you should listen to me more closely in the future. After all, when did your uncle ever treat you unfairly?" Sighing, Bazius-Hun felt more than ever like someone from the older generation, and knew that he had to take care of Sankei no matter how he did it. Then, after he got back to the river-defying sect, he would make sure Songjun knew all about it. She would definitely be pleased. Sighing, he led all of his Tao protectors back to Deck 3. After entering Bazius-Hun's cabin, not even Sankei's willpower could prevent him from gasping and looking around with shock at the size of the room, the spirit food, the puppets, the limestone floor, and the balcony. Almost immediately, he felt stabs of pain pricking at his heart. In that moment, he madly swore an oath in his heart that he would focus fully on cultivation, and strive for his own chance to break into the top 10. The difference in treatment between that group and where he was at almost couldn't be described in words. In fact, that difference was so great that Sankei could even feel his eyes getting a bit moist. As for Master God Diviner, he also gasped, and was instantly drawn to the windows. During the past 3 days, the only way he had been able to feel the sun on his face was to go to the main deck, but things were too noisy there, and the spray from the waves was too dangerous. But in Bazius-Hun's cabin, one could look out the windows at any time, or even sit on the safety of the balcony. Master God Diviner was instantly overwhelmed with excitement. As for Chen Manyao, she was also stunned into silence. Before, she had assumed the difference in accommodations would be big, but not this big. As of this moment, she couldn't help but feel a bit irked at how the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect had arranged things. The looks on their faces caused Bazius-Hun to sigh. He hadn't actually intended to show off in this situation, and was now worried that his friends might misunderstand his intentions. As such, he quickly tried to explain how he felt. "This is all my fault," he said. "If I had worked a bit harder, maybe I could have made it into the top 3. I heard that their accommodations are even better than these, and bigger. Mine are only so-so." Bazish-hun really was just trying to smooth things over, but the result was that even stranger looks appeared on the faces of his 3 friends. Seeing this, Bazish-hun was just getting ready to try to explain things further, when all of a sudden, a near-piercing cry rang out from the sea outside. The cabin was protected by a spell formation, so the fact that the cry was distinctly audible went to show how incredibly powerful it was. In fact, the entire battleship even began to sway from side to side a bit. Bazish-hun's face fell, and his 3 Dao protectors had similar reactions. All of them rushed over to the balcony and looked out, whereupon they saw a streak of silver light shooting out of the sea and up into the sky. That streak of light was what had caused the noise just now, and had also sent a huge wave slamming into the side of the ship. As such, it was possible to imagine that whatever it was that was causing that light was extraordinary. Gasping, Bazish-hun craned his neck in an attempt to see what was inside of the light, and almost immediately could tell that it was something with a Heaven Dao aura. Although others might not notice it, because Bazish-hun had a Heaven Dao gold core, he was more acutely attuned to such matters. "What is that?" he thought. At this point, he couldn't hold back from opening his Heavenspan Dharma eye. Almost immediately, rumbling sounds filled his mind, and he felt stabbing pain in his forehead. He quickly closed his third eye, which had already begun to leak some blood. Even in that short moment, Bazish-hun had been able to catch a glimpse of what was in the light, and it left his mind and heart battered by waves of shock. Within that light was a silver-colored dragon. Apparently, that dragon was injured, and even as it flew along, silver blood leaked from its wounds. In the instant that the silver dragon appeared, the 3-eyed David Chen-Hishan was meditating on deck 1. Suddenly, all of his eyes opened, and his expression flickered with incredulity and joy. "A silver moon dragonfish!" he shouted. "Kong Lai, the 5 of you come with me right now. We're going to catch that beast." With that, he vanished, to reappear a moment later up in midair. As for the 5 nascent soul cultivators, they teleported out to join Chen-Hishan. Even as they appeared out in the open, expressions shining with anticipation, the silver light began to disappear over the horizon. "Let's go. If we get that dragonfish, I'll give all 5 of you an incredible reward." Chen-Hishan's eyes burned with passion as he and the 5 nascent soul cultivators shot off into the distance. Many of the other cultivators on the ship could tell that something strange was going on, and had hurried up to the main deck. When they saw what was happening, various expressions appeared on their faces. On deck 2, Zhao Tanjiao and Chen Yushan appeared to see what the commotion was about, with Heretic being the only one who didn't react. Although no one noticed, Gong Sunwaner was in her cabin, standing at the window and looking at the silver light fading off into the distance. A strange smile could be seen on her face, and on the tip of her index finger was a single drop of silver blood, which she quickly licked away. "Finally, I can get some real food," she said with a chuckle. Considering how fast Chen-Hishan and the nascent soul cultivators were moving, and the speed of the battleship, it only took about 10 breaths of time before they were completely separated. Everyone on the battleship began to discuss matters, but soon the talk quieted down. With the Deva and the nascent soul cultivators gone, and the vast sea stretching out in all directions, a sense of unease filled the hearts of everyone present. Time passed. 3 days later, Chen-Hishan and the nascent soul cultivators still weren't back, and everyone aboard the battleship felt greater pressure weighing down on their shoulders. Furthermore, there was a strange and mysterious aura that seemed to be building up around them. Chapter 446, Dinner? Tonight? Days passed. Song K, Master God Diviner and Chen Manyao all had their own personal space in Bazish-hun's cabin, and were able to enjoy the treatment that only cultivators in the top 10 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars could receive. Filled with gratitude, they did their best to focus on their cultivation. Bazish-hun wasn't very far from the great circle of core formation, and couldn't help but feel that he was already quite formidable. Therefore, he spent most of his time basking in the sun on his balcony and looking out at the sea, which was exactly what he was doing right now. The main deck of the ship wasn't very far above Bazish-hun's balcony, and among the cultivators there was Gong Sunwaner, who was apparently also staring out at the sea. Bazish-hun finally looked away from the seawater and then took a long swig of spirit alcohol. "Now this is the life," he said with a sigh. Behind him were 2 puppet handmaidens who were massaging his shoulders. Occasionally, huge waves would roll across the surface of the water, but at the moment, it looked more like a beautiful golden mirror. By this point, Bazish-hun was used to the wind, and as for the seawater, because of the techniques he cultivated, it wouldn't harm him unless he was exposed to it for long periods of time. Furthermore, because of the spell formation built into the battleship, the incredibly intense spiritual energy in the water was softened and purified before entering the ship. Sighing, Bazius Hun looked back at his huge cabin, and saw Song Ke, Master God Diviner, and Chen Manyao all sitting cross-legged in meditation, apparently completely focused on their cultivation. Feeling a bit bored, he decided that he should probably go find someone to chat with. These guys are too focused on cultivation. This half a year is a time to enjoy things. Once we reach our destination, we'll be heading into the outposts of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity sect, and the Great Wall. Things definitely won't be as comfortable there. Wouldn't it be great if Zubekai were here? Taking another drink of spirit alcohol, he was just contemplating how to alleviate his boredom when, all of a sudden, he saw a golden flash of light off in the distance. Some distance away, a school of golden fish had just leapt up out of the seawater, flashing through the air like golden sparks before splashing back down into the water. Considering how sharp Bazius Hun's vision was, he could see the fish quite clearly, and was able to tell that they were about as long as a human arm. They were covered with glittering golden scales, and most shocking of all, had 2 heads. Furthermore, those 2 heads weren't located next to each other. Rather, the second head was where a fish's tail would normally be. Golden loaches! Bazius Hun exclaimed, shooting to his feet. He recognized these strange fish from one of the volumes of spirit creatures he had studied in the Spirit Stream sect, and knew that they were a very rare type of spirit fish. Such spirit fish didn't need to be refined into medicinal pills to be consumed as food. They were a precious material of heaven and earth that could strengthen the chi passageways and bolster divine sense. Fish like that could be very useful for cultivators, and if they were older than 100 years of age, could even help when stepping into the nascent soul stage. As Bazius Hun looked excitedly out at the sea, the school of golden loaches once again broke the surface of the water. Then a huge amount of water exploded up as a fish 10 times larger than any of the other ones launched itself up into the air. Just like the other fish, it was golden in color and had 2 heads. However, there was something ancient to this one, as though it had lived for a very long time. Furthermore, its scales glittered with a golden light that surpassed the other fish. 100-year-old golden loach. Gasping, Bazius Hun waved his hand, sending a stream of frigid chi out which instantly wrapped around the fish. However, a stream of power shot back toward him, destabilizing his cultivation base and very nearly dragging him off of the balcony. Expression flickering, he quickly called out at the top of his lungs, "Ker, Master Snort, little man Yao, hurry up and help me. I hooked a precious treasure here." Song Ke, Master God Diviner, and Chen Man Yao immediately opened their eyes from meditation. Song Ke seemed a bit irritated, and Master God Diviner was also slightly annoyed. As for Chen Man Yao, she had the same smile on her face that she usually did. However, when all of them looked over and saw the huge loach leaping into and out of the water, their eyes went wide. Song Ke was the first to rush out, followed by Chen Man Yao and Master God Diviner. "Hurry up and help me," Bazius Hun said excitedly. "If we can catch this fish, we'll have a great dinner tonight." With that, he poured some more cultivation base power into his efforts. Thankfully, as a member of the Spirit Stream sect, he had been cultivating control power for quite some time, and was very familiar with it. Therefore, despite the fact that the fish had already dropped back down under the surface of the water, he still managed to maintain a connection to it. The struggling of the enormous fish was causing huge waves to roll out, along with intense crashing sounds. Thankfully, Song Ke and the others quickly arrived to help. Song Ke's right hand flashed with an incantation gesture, and a shadow spread out from his feet and into the water. Although the water weakened it a bit, it still managed to shoot directly toward the huge fish. Master God Diviner also performing an incantation gesture as he unleashed the power of a magical item. Chen Man Yao's actions were the strangest of all. After performing an incantation gesture, she opened her mouth and spat out a pink cloud, which rapidly shrank down into the shape of a mist hawk that let out a piercing cry as it dove toward the fish. Bazius Hun let out a whoop of excitement. Moments ago, he had been bored, but now everything had changed. "Come on everybody, don't hold anything back," he shouted. "We can't let this fish get away." Bazius Hun's excitement was rubbing off on the others, whose hearts began to pound. Considering how much this huge fish was struggling, they all could tell that it wasn't anything ordinary. The fish struggled mightily, even letting out muffled cries that reached the cultivators who were gathered on the deck. As for Gong Sunwaner, she wasn't too far away from Bazius Hun's position, and when she looked down, she could actually see the fish, as well as Bazius Hun and his Dao protectors. Laughing softly in amusement, she waved her finger in the direction of the huge fish, unleashing her own cultivation base power to aid Bazius Hun and the others. Bazius Hun sensed that Gong Sunwaner was helping them, and was quite moved. "Waner," he shouted. "Help us reel in this fish and we'll all have a great dinner." Gong Sunwaner looked down at Bazius Hun, smiled, and said, "Dinner? You mean tonight?" "Yeah," he replied, not thinking much about her question. Under the combined efforts of the group, the struggling fish slowly weakened, and soon, they managed to heave it up out of the water toward the battleship. Laughing excitedly, Bazius Hun extended his hands to grab the fish. Simultaneously, excited smiles broke out on the faces of Song Ke, Master God Diviner, and even Chen Man Yao. Although catching his huge fish hadn't involved any danger, they were out in the middle of the heavens Pansy, and had worked quite hard to succeed. However, even as the huge fish flew through the air, a figure burst into motion from the deck, moving like lighting to unleash his great circle core formation cultivation base power. Before anyone could do anything, he had waved his finger in the direction of the fish. Instantly, a huge hand appeared in the middle of the air, which rumbled toward the exhausted fish, and then hit it with such intense power that it instantly died. Next, the hand wrapped around the fish and pulled it back toward a young man on the deck of the ship, who swished his sleeve to pull the fish into his bag of holding. "What are you doing?" Bazius Hun shouted, enraged. Unable to react in time, he had no choice but to fly up to the deck, fuming with anger. Song Ke, Master God Diviner, and Chen Man Yao all joined him, where they confronted the young man face to face. "Hey," Bazius Hun said, "we saw that fish first, and we're the ones who weakened it. We were just about to grab it, you thief." Shockingly, the young man in front of them had once been in the top 3 of the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, but was now in 5th place. His name was Ji Feng. "Are you kidding me?" Ji Feng said, a cruel expression twisting his face. "I have the fish now. It's mine." Of course, he completely ignored Song Ke and the others, and only looked at Bazius Hun and Gong Sunwaner, albeit with complete scorn. Chapter 447, The Return of the Unclean Thing. Ji Feng had been eyeing the golden loach the entire time. Virtually everyone on the battleship had almost instantly begun to covet it, with the exception of Zhao Tanjiao, Chen Yushan and Heretic. Therefore, Ji Feng had simply decided to snatch it in the heat of the moment. Although he did fear Bazius Hun to some extent, he was confident that he could handle him, even if he teamed up with Gong Sunwaner. After all, Bazius Hun wasn't the only one with people to back him up. Ji Feng had his own followers. Therefore, he didn't even bother to respond, and simply turned on his heel and walked off. Insufferable bully. Bazius Hun grumbled angrily. To have his belongings openly robbed was a bitter pill to swallow, and he was just about to step forward to prevent Ji Feng from leaving when Master God Diviner grabbed his arm. "Junior Patriarch, just let it go. Ji Feng used to be in the top 3, and even though he's dropped down to 5th place, he's still terrifyingly powerful." "It's just a fish," Song Ke said through gritted teeth as he watched Ji Feng walking away. "There's no need to get into a big fight over it. That might make things problematic once we reach the sect outposts." Considering that everyone was persuading him to back down, Bazius Hun clenched his jaw and let out a cold harumph. He could tell then both Song Ke and Master God Diviner felt the same way and didn't want to offend Ji Feng. Even if Bazius Hun made a move on his own, it would still drag them into it, so therefore, he really had no choice other than to just grin and bear it. "That guy is too overbearing," he muttered. "With a personality like that, he'll definitely get killed once we reach the wildlands." With that, he returned dejectedly to his cabin. After the scene was over, only Gong Sunwaner remained standing there. Although no one noticed it, she was chuckling as she watched Ji Feng walking away. Then she licked her lips, a strange light flickering in her eyes. "Looks yummy," she murmured to herself. Nothing happened that night for Bazius Hun. He sat cross-legged in meditation, mulling over the day's events and feeling more irritated by the moment. "I can't just let this drop," he thought. "Ji Feng might have some skills, but I have even more skills. I have to think of a way to teach him a lesson he won't ever forget." Having reached this point in his train of thought, he opened his bag of holding to look for the little turtle, but even after searching around for quite a while, couldn't find him. By the time the first rays of dawn emerged, he was feeling more depressed than ever. However, it was at that point that the still and quiet atmosphere of the battleship was broken by a blood-curdling scream that echoed out from Deck 3, the very same deck that Bazius Hun's cabin was on. There was something terrifying about that scream, as if it had been fueled by a life force that was in the midst of being extinguished. Quite a few people heard the scream, including Bazius Hun. "What's going on?" Song Ke and the other Dao protectors opened their eyes and looked around, shocked. Before long, the other top 10 chosen on Deck 3 began to emerge, Bazius Hun included. Even Zhao Danjiao and Chen Yushan came down from Deck 2, and joined in as everyone searched for the origin of the scream. It didn't take long before they discovered that one of the cabins on Deck 3 had a shriveled corpse in it. The corpse was discovered in Ji Feng's cabin. And after examining it closely, Everyone could tell that it was none other than Jifeng himself. This, Baziush-hun said with a gasp. Jifeng had been withered dry to the point where he was almost unrecognizable. Despite being little more than a skeleton, he clearly hadn't been dead for long, and yet, already seemed to be rotting. Everyone present was a core formation cultivator and a top chosen, and therefore, it didn't take long before they all noticed that Jifeng had died in a very strange way. Apparently, all of his blood had been drained away. Gasps and looks of astonishment appeared on the faces of everyone present. After all, Jifeng was in the great circle of core formation, and possessed incredible battle prowess. And yet, there were no signs of magical combat in the area, as though Jifeng had been killed in the briefest of instants. Even more telling was that Jifeng's cabin was filled with intense, frigid coldness, something that caused everyone's minds to tremble. Baziush-hun stared mutely at Jifeng's corpse, his eyes wide with incredulity. He had been thinking about Jifeng all night, and never could have imagined that the following day, he would actually be dead. He really died? Baziush-hun was having trouble controlling his breathing, especially when he realized that the corpse itself actually looked very familiar. Before he could put much thought into it, the faces of Master God Diviner and Song-K drained of blood, and looks of fear began to shine in their eyes. Chen Manyao also gasped, and a look of fear spread out across her face. If the three-eyed Chen Hishan and the nascent soul cultivators had been present, things might not have been as terrifying. But all of those members of the senior generation were gone, and none of the core formation disciples present were quite sure what to do. Therefore, everyone looked to Zhao Tanjiao to take the lead. After approaching the corpse and examining it for a moment, his expression flickered and he said, "It seems that some sort of unclean thing is on board the ship with us. Everyone needs to be extra careful." All the disciples present shivered in fear, and as for Baziush-hun, he felt his scalp going numb. Unfortunately, the mystery of Jifeng's death was not something that could be explained at the moment, so everyone eventually dispersed, maintaining full vigilance along the way. Heart-pounding with fear, Baziush-hun returned to his cabin with Song-K, Master God Diviner and Chen Manyao. As soon as they were all inside, he closed the door and then looked at his ashen-faced friends. Worried that he might be reading too much into the situation, he tentatively asked, "Did you guys also think that corpse looked familiar?" Face filled with alarm and terror, Master God Diviner replied, "Junior Patriarch. That corpse reminds me of the corpses back in the river-defying sect. It looks exactly the same." Song-K growled. "I noticed it too," Chen Manyao said after a moment. "This corpse looks just like those other corpses." Upon hearing their responses, Baziush-hun felt like his scalp was tingling so hard it was going to explode. Considering how familiar the corpse seemed, and coupled with Zhao Tanjiao's words, he couldn't help but think about what had happened back in the river-defying sect. Now, the confirmation of his three Dao protectors left him convinced that the two events were connected. "Damn it!" he wailed. "How could this be happening? I came all the way here, and that unclean thing followed the entire way." The more he thought about it, the stranger it and more terrifying it seemed. In fact, he immediately produced some evil warding talismans from his bag of holding and plastered them onto himself. Of course, that wasn't enough for him. He quickly urged Master God Diviner and Song-K to help him set up some more spell formations in the cabin. Then he went into his own private room and set up some additional spell formations, and also made sure he had plenty of soul convergence spells ready. "I have evil warding talismans, spell formations, and soul convergence pills. If that unclean thing has any sense at all, it won't dare to provoke me. Yeah, that's right. If it provokes me, it will definitely meet a miserable end." Scowling on the verge of tears, he continued to try to encourage himself with the fact that Song-K and the others were also present. Considering that they were around, it wasn't likely that the unclean thing would come for him. But then he remembered that Jifeng had been in the great circle of core formation. Considering that he was also in the core formation stage, that left him feeling more unprotected and unsafe than ever. The image of Jifeng's desiccated, blood-drained corpse remained floating in his mind constantly. Just what kind of ghost are we dealing with? He thought. When is that David Chen Hishan going to get back? It was in this manner that he stood in his anxiety and vigilance for an entire night. He wasn't the only nervous one, of course. Song-K, Master God Diviner, Chen Manyao, and all the other chosen on Deck 3, and even the disciples on Decks 4 and 5, were all very anxious. If any other person had been killed, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But Jifeng had been in 5th place in the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, with extraordinary battle prowess. And yet, he had still met a bizarre and grisly fate, leaving everyone feeling completely ill at ease. When dawn came, and people checked around and found that no one else had died, people finally began to breathe sighs of relief. Baziush-hun was slightly less anxious, but not by much. Taking advantage of the daylight, he set up more spell formations both inside and outside of his room. Sadly, he wasn't good at creating paper talismans, otherwise he would have painted many, many more such items to ward off evil spirits. 3 days passed by in a flash. No one died, and soon, the atmosphere on the ship returned to normal. People once again went up onto the main deck. However, everyone still felt a great weight on their hearts, and often looked up into the sky, hoping to see three-eyed Chen Hishan and the nascent soul cultivators returning. Eventually, half a month went by. And yet, Chen Hishan and the others still were not back. However, no one had been killed during that time. At long last, Bezius Hun breathed a sigh of relief. Maybe I was mistaken. Maybe Ji Fang was killed, not by the unclean thing, but by that big fish? Chapter 448, Junior Brother Bei, a word please? After much thought, Bezius Hun wasn't able to determine whether or not the 100-year-old Loach could possibly have been the cause of death. However, he knew that he definitely couldn't come up with any answers locked in his room, so eventually, he called on his Dao protectors to discuss the matter further. Over the past few days, his Dao protectors had been too rattled to focus fully on cultivation, but once they heard this new fish theory of Bezius Hun's, they began to calm down. Finally, after more than half a month of remaining in seclusion, Bezius Hun emerged and headed up to the main deck. There, he happened to catch sight of Gong Sunwaner, who also seemed to have come up to the deck to relieve her boredom. Upon catching sight of Bezius Hun and his Dao protectors, she smiled and joined them. Most of the cultivators on the deck were grouped together in twos or threes, although a few of them stood by themselves. As such, Bezius Hun's group was the largest present. Song Ke was walking behind him, radiating his usual murderous aura that made him seem completely unapproachable. Master God Diviner was walking next to him, looking almost like his personal assistant. And then there was Gong Sunwaner on one side with her incredible good looks, and Chen Manyao on the other side with her spectacular beauty. Together, they made quite a sight. Many of the cultivators in the area looked over at Bezius Hun, and although some of them had cold looks on their faces, many seemed envious. Bezius Hun took a deep breath of sea air, looked up into the sky, and then gazed out at the golden sea. Gradually, the weight in his heart seemed to lessen. He sighed. I can't believe our wonderful voyage took such a turn for the worse. Looking around at the crowd, he suddenly realized that a lot of people were looking at him. Turning, he realized that Gong Sunwaner and Chen Manyao were right by him, and by chance, both of them happened to be smiling at him. They were two different smiles, and two different facial expressions, but they were both very beautiful. All of a sudden, Bezius Hun's mood got even better. As of that moment, he discovered a new hobby. In the following days, he would take time every day to go for a stroll on deck, and would always make sure to chat openly with Chen Manyao and Gong Sunwaner. As they smiled and laughed with him, many of the other cultivators in the area would look over enviously. The more looks like that he got, the more he liked this new hobby, and at the same time, he felt less distant from Gong Sunwaner. Gong Sunwaner really is pretty when she smiles, he thought, glancing around proudly at the crowd. As he did, he noticed that up ahead, Zhao Tanjiao was standing there, looking as cold as a statue. During the past few days, he had caught sight of Zhao Tanjiao a few times, as well as Chen Yushan. Both of them were superstars in the top 3, with extremely high status. They were the type of people who didn't need to have an entourage to provoke countless envious glances from the surrounding cultivators. As Zhao Tanjiao walked along, a group of 7 or 8 other cultivators trailed along behind him, looking very subservient. Bezius Hun actually recognized some of them from back on Sky Quarter Rainbow, when he'd gone around asking for help to get some 7-colored Misty grass. Lowering his voice, he leaned over and said, Hey Master Snort, why do you think all of the superstars are so cold-looking? Zhao Tanjiao looks like he's above everyone else, and it's the same with Chen Yushan and Heretic. They hardly ever hang out with anybody else, and spend most of their time in secluded meditation. Master God Diviner hesitated for a moment and then said, well, maybe they act that way because everyone expects them to be like that. Even as Bezius Hun contemplated this possibility, he looked over at Zhao Tanjiao, and found that Zhao Tanjiao had turned and was looking back at him. Suddenly, their gazes met. Although Zhao Tanjiao's expression was placid, there was something intense within his eyes that Bezius Hun found to be almost painful. Of course, although Bezius Hun was definitely the type who feared death, he was not the type who shrank back when someone simply looked at him. As soon as he felt the painful intensity of Zhao Tanjiao's gaze, his own eyes began to shine as he stared back. Though no sound could be heard from the interlocking of their gazes, both of their minds filled with intense fluctuations. Bezius Hun's expression flickered, and he stopped walking, and then Zhao Tanjiao retracted his vision. And yet, unlike Bezius Hun, Zhao Tanjiao didn't stop walking. Instead, he headed in Bezius Hun's direction. Zhao Tanjiao occupied one street place among the starry sky Dao polarity superstars, so no matter where he went, he was always the center of attention. When people realized that he was walking toward Baiziashun, everyone began to pay close attention. That was especially true considering that he was flanked by 7 or 8 followers, making it seem like a grand procession. Song Kei's expression turned very serious, and although Master God Diviner initially gaped in shock, his expression quickly became the same as Song Kei's. Even Chen Manyao looked surprised. The only one among the group whose expression was the same as ever was Gong Sunwaner, who even seemed interested to see what would happen with Zhao Tanjiao. As Zhao Tanjiao proceeded forward, silence fell upon the main deck. Everyone was watching as he slowly came to a stop right in front of Baiziashun. His expression was as cold as ice, and he looked like a glistening, unsheathed sword, as powerful as a mountain who could look down upon everything below him. As he measured Baiziashun up, Baiziashun blinked a few times, wondering what exactly was going on. After all, he and Zhao Tanjiao had only ever seen each other a few times, and had never even exchanged words. After a moment, Baiziashun couldn't hold back from saying, "Elder brother Zhao?" Almost as soon as the words left Baiziashun's mouth, Zhao Tanjiao responded in a cold voice, "Junior brother Bei, a word please?" Although Zhao Tanjiao didn't unleash any of his aura, considering his status and accomplishments in battle, he was the type of person that would leave anyone feeling cold with fear. "Huh?" Baiziashun replied, feeling a bit shocked. After a moment of thought, he nodded. The truth was that he wasn't scared, just curious as to why a superstar like Zhao Tanjiao would want to talk with him. Zhao Tanjiao's face remained as cold as ever as he headed toward the prow of the ship. As he neared, the cultivators who had originally been gathered there backed away to make room. More curious than ever, Baiziashun followed along. Of course, he maintained his vigilance the entire way, although he doubted that Zhao Tanjiao had any ill intentions, he was prepared for anything. Soon Baiziashun and Zhao Tanjiao were alone at the prow of the ship, whereupon Zhao Tanjiao waved his right hand, causing a glittering shield of light to rise up that cut them off completely from everything outside. Clearly, this was not a defensive shield, but rather something that would block both sound and divine sense alike. As of this moment, the two of them would be able to speak freely without anyone else being able to hear. Baiziashun's curiosity continued to mount as he looked expectantly at Zhao Tanjiao, waiting to hear what he had to say. Zhao Tanjiao stood there quietly for a moment looking at Baiziashun, his expression extremely solemn, as though he were wrestling with an important issue. Baiziashun's curiosity was reaching the boiling point, and as for everyone else on the main deck, they were watching the scene play out with various expressions on their faces. I wonder why eldest brother wants to talk with Baiziashun? Something strange is going on. Could it have something to do with the death of Jifeng? Now that I think about, there was some friction between Jifeng and Baiziashun right before Jifeng died. All sorts of speculations filled the hearts of the onlookers. Even as Baiziashun was going to try to make his own guess, Zhao Tanjiao took a deep breath and said, "Junior brother Bei." Baiziashun leaned forward intently. Looking very serious, Zhao Tanjiao said, "Junior brother Bei, those 2 girls you hang out with are pretty good looking." "Huh?" Baiziashun said, stunned. Considering the serious look on Zhao Tanjiao's face, he almost wondered if he had misheard him. Listen, don't take this the wrong way, junior brother. I don't have any feelings for them. I just want to know how you managed to win them over. I've been watching you the past few days, and really want to understand how you managed to get 2 hotties like that to hang out with you." Zhao Tanjiao had a somber expression on his cold-looking face. He seemed tall and proud, like an unsheathed sword. And yet, the words he spoke caused Baiziashun's eyes to go as wide as saucers. Had he not heard the words with his own 2 ears, Zhao Tanjiao's somber expression would have made it completely impossible for Baiziashun to guess what it was he wanted to talk about. It was completely unexpected. Baiziashun scratched his head, feeling a bit confused. Without even thinking about it, he said, "They're the ones who took to hanging out with me. I couldn't get rid of them if I tried." When Zhao Tanjiao heard this, his expression turned even more serious than before, and he even frowned. Considering his status and incredible battle prowess, a frown like that would make anyone who saw it feel like a thunderstorm were descending. Of course, no one could hear what the 2 of them were talking about. They could only see the expressions on their faces. First, they saw the incredulity and disbelief of Baiziashun, and immediately began to come up with explanations for why he was reacting in such a way. Something big is happening. Look you guys. Baiziashun is shaking his head. Now he's explaining something. This is really weird. Look at eldest brother's expression. It's even more serious than before. It's almost like he doesn't believe what Baiziashun just told him. Chapter 449, So, you're that kind of person. As the onlookers speculated about what was happening, Sonkai and Master God Diviner looked on in shock, completely unable to come up with any ideas of what Zhao Tanjiao and Bezish Hun might be talking about. Even Chen Manyao seemed very curious. Gong Sunwaner was the only one with a slight smile on her face. Meanwhile, up at the front of the ship, Bezish Hun was only just now recovering from his shock. It was with a very odd expression that he looked at Zhao Tanjiao, pondering how this was the one street place eldest brother from the Starry Sky Dao Polarity Superstars, a person with a profound cultivation base, who could cut down nascent soul experts. This is the kind of guy I should probably make friends with, he thought. That way, if someone picks on me in the wildlands, I'll have someone to help me out. Things will probably go much more smoothly with a friend like him. With these thoughts on his mind, Bezish Hun smiled and patted Zhao Tanjiao's shoulder like he would a close companion. Voice as casual as a spring breeze, he said, "Eldest brother." Zhao Tanjiao wasn't used to people touching him, and was about to back away, when he heard Bezish Hun's tone of voice, and could tell that he was speaking with heartfelt sincerity. Therefore, he allowed Bezish Hun to continue to clasp his shoulder. "You have to trust me on this one, eldest brother. Those two girls you saw me with, there are only two of them, right? Well, back in the river-defying sect, I got love letters from tens of thousands of girls." Bezish Hun sighed and tried not to look proud of himself. Assuming that Bezish Hun must be exaggerating, Zhao Tanjiao frowned. Of course, the expressions playing out on their faces fueled more discussions among the onlookers. That was especially true when Bezish Hun clasped Zhao Tanjiao's shoulder, and Zhao Tanjiao didn't back away. Shocked expressions appeared on the faces of everyone present. To these people, Zhao Tanjiao occupied the highest of high positions, and was a completely proud and aloof figure. He was the type of cold person that no one could ever get close to. Therefore, to see this sudden change in behavior was quite shocking. Back at the prow of the ship, Zhao Tanjiao was frowning in disappointment at Bezish Hun. In fact, he was actually planning to simply turn and leave. "Hey! You still don't believe me? Alright, look at this." Bezish Hun hated when people didn't trust what he said, so he quickly patted his bag of holding, causing a rustling sound to fill the air as vast quantities of love letters began to spill out like rain. There were so many of them that they quickly formed a tiny mountain right there on the deck. Zhao Tanjiao gasped, his eyes going wide with shock and disbelief. He even picked up a few of the letters and read them, whereupon an expression of even greater astonishment appeared. It quickly became obvious that all of the love letters were written by different people, and were not fake. There were even some jade slips in the pile, within which could be seen the beautiful faces of the girls who had delivered them. This. Zhao Tanjiao was starting to pant, and his heart trembled fiercely as it was battered by waves of shock. He looked up slowly at Bezish Hun, the same expression in his eyes that he would have if he was facing a diva. Swishing his sleeve proudly, Bezish Hun stuck his chin up and said, "See? Now do you believe me? And this is only some of my collection. I have more in my bag of holding." With the snap of a finger, I, Bezish Hun, won over the hearts of countless female cultivators in the river-defying sect. The strange scene which was now playing out caused the hearts and minds of the onlookers to be filled with both shock and speculation. No one could hear the words being spoken, and divine sense was useless, so all they could do was watch what was happening. When people saw the huge pile of letters pouring out of Bezish Hun's bag of holding, they gaped in shock. At first, many people didn't take the letters to be anything special, but soon people realized that many of them were folded up into the shape of hearts. What are those things? Heavens! Eldest brother is actually going through and reading some of them. Why do I get the feeling that those are love letters? Nah. No way. Have you ever seen anyone with that many love letters? There must be more than 10,000 of them. They're obviously not love letters. Besides, look at the expression on eldest brother's face. He is clearly privy to some mysterious secret, right? How come this Bezish Hun only proves to be more and more enigmatic? Of course, when Chen Manyao recognized the love letters, she made a sh sound, seemingly unsure of whether to laugh or cry. Before people could look at the scene too closely to analyze what was happening, Zhao Tanjiao took a deep breath and waved his hand, causing the sound barrier to suddenly blur, making it impossible for anyone to even see the two of them. Expression extremely somber and profoundly sincere, Zhao Tanjiao clasped hands and bowed deeply to Bezish Hun. "Junior brother Bei, I almost can't believe that someone as young as you has such uncanny skill. I wonder if you might be willing to deign to teach me a thing or two?" Bezish Hun was yet again taken aback by the strange sight of Zhao Tanjiao looking so serious and yet uttering such words. "You want to learn that kind of stuff?" Bezish Hun asked quizzically. Eyes shining with solemnity, Zhao Tanjiao took a deep breath and yet again bowed deeply. "Junior brother Bei, please teach me. I want to be happy in life, And if you can bless me with such kindness, I'll never forget it for as long as I live. Bezish Hun blinked a couple times as he finally came to realize what was going on. Zhao Tanjiao was clearly the type of person who seemed cold and distant on the outside, but was secretly very passionate and romantic. After a moment, Bezish Hun laughed heartily. Hey, we're brothers, right? What do you mean teach you a thing or two? Let's schedule some time and I'll teach you everything I know. Just tell me which girl it is that you like. There's no challenge that love Saint Bezish Hun can't handle. He even slapped his chest confidently to emphasize his words. Zhao Tanjiao heaved a long sigh of relief. They immediately set a time to meet and discuss the matter further, after which Zhao Tanjiao bowed deeply, then dispelled the sealing shield and walked away somberly. Bezish Hun put all of the love letters away, and then strutted proudly back to his Dao protectors. Master God Diviner seemed very curious, and although Song Ke was feigning complete disinterest, it was obvious that he was paying close attention to Bezish Hun. After a moment, Master God Diviner couldn't hold back from asking, Junior Patriarch, what were you talking about over there with Zhao Tanjiao? I can't say, Bezish Hun said, shaking his head in very enigmatic fashion. It's a matter which touches on the most important thing in elder brother Zhao's life. How could I possibly reveal that information so casually? Clasping his hands behind his back, he pompously strolled off toward his cabin. Of course, his secrecy only caused Master God Diviner and the others to grow more curious, and it was the same with everyone else who had been present to witness the scene. In fact, many people began making discreet inquiries to try to dig up information, although none of that produced any results. 3 days passed, during which time Bezish Hun never left his cabin. Instead, he waited patiently for Zhao Tanjiao to come consult with him. Seeing this, Master God Diviner couldn't help but ask about the situation a few more times, but each time, his inquiries were rebuffed. Finally, though, Bezish Hun sighed and said, I'm waiting for someone. Zhao Tanjiao? Master God Diviner replied, shocked. Even Song Ke's ears perked up. That's right, Bezish Hun replied calmly. The truth is that the only person on this entire battleship who can help him is me, Bezish Hun. With that, he closed his eyes and continued to meditate, looking prouder of himself than ever. Master God Diviner and Song Ke exchanged a quizzical glance. However, no amount of speculation on their part could provide any insight. Finally, when evening was falling on the third day, Zhao Tanjiao's voice could be heard outside the cabin door. Is Junior Brother Bei in? Master God Diviner and Song Ke looked over at Bezish Hun, who slowly opened his eyes. Hurry up and get the door. Man Yao, please give us some privacy. Chen Man Yao gave a light harumph. She had her own speculations about what was going on, but had no choice but to glide over to her room and close the door. As for Song Ke, his eyes widened to a glare, but he knew that he was a guest under someone else's roof, so therefore he simply gritted his teeth and went to open the door. As soon as the door opened, Zhao Tanjiao appeared, solemn as ever as he walked in with 2 followers. The 2 followers had anxious expressions on their faces. They happened to be 2 of the chosen from the Hall of Devil Slayers that Bezish Hun had visited to ask for help buying medicinal ingredients. Back then, both of them had intentionally made things difficult for Bezish Hun. One of them had quoted an astronomical price, and the other had pretended to be in secluded meditation. How could they ever have imagined that Bezish Hun would suddenly rise to the top in spectacular fashion, reaching the violet portion of the rainbow and shaking the entire sect? Of course, even after all of that, they had still felt confident that Bezish Hun wouldn't come looking for revenge, not considering that they were followers of Zhao Tanjiao. But now, it was to their complete disbelief that they learned that Zhao Tanjiao and Bezish Hun were somehow very close to each other. What was even more shocking was that Zhao Tanjiao had a very serious expression on his face, and was being very polite. The 2 of them couldn't help but be quite shaken. Upon entering, Zhao Tanjiao took a deep breath and, completely ignoring the fact that Master God Diviner and Song Ke were still present, clasped hands and bowed deeply. Junior Brother Bei, I hope you won't laugh at me when I tell you that I've always been in love with Junior Sister Yushan. I just don't know how to win her over. In terms of compensation, I'll give you anything you ask for, as long as it's in my power. Even a Deva Beast soul. Chapter 450, Wind Charm. Master God Diviner took a deep breath, and Song Ke stood off to the side with a look of blank shock on his face. No matter how either of them had considered the matter, they could never have guessed that the preeminently proud Zhao Tanjiao would say something like that upon entering Bezish Hun's cabin. They weren't the only ones to be completely taken aback. Zhao Tanjiao's 2 followers were also struck with shock. That was especially true considering that the compensation Zhao Tanjiao was offering was a Deva Beast soul. All 4 of the other cultivators present were completely flabbergasted by that. Back at the sect, a Deva Beast soul could be traded for a nascent soul pill, which showed how incredibly valuable they were. Meanwhile, Bazius Hun sat there cross-legged, not even having bothered to rise to his feet. In fact, he was actually frowning in displeasure. Then he snorted coldly, flicked his sleeve and angrily said, "Elder brother Zhao, you and I got along with each other at first sight, and it was the sincerity of your request that convinced me to help you. And yet here you go and offer compensation? Do you really think that I, Bazius Hun, am the kind of person who cares about compensation from you?" Face turning even more grim, he continued, "David Beast Soul. Humphrey. If I want one of those, I'll get it myself. You may leave now, Elder brother Zhao. See yourself out." Master God Diviner and Song Ke suddenly found it hard to breathe, and Zhao Tanjiao's two followers' jaws dropped. As for the latter, they had never heard anyone in the current generation of disciples speak to Zhao Tanjiao in such a way. Just as they were about to step forward and berate Bazius Hun, Zhao Tanjiao raised his hand to stop them. Giving Bazius Hun a deep look, he suddenly smiled, which was something he very rarely did. "How foolish of me, my brother. Please don't be angry." The sincerity of his smile and his words caused the hearts of his two followers to begin to pound even harder. They had been followers of Zhao Tanjiao for a very long time, and had never once seen him smile. Not only was that shocking in and of itself, but it also made them even more terrified of Bazius Hun. Laughing heartily, Bazius Hun rose to his feet. "Eldest brother, the truth is that I'm just trying to get the best you have to offer. You see, the reason I want to help you is not because I want to make a quick profit, but rather, because I seek long-term compensation. And that compensation is none other than your friendship." Bazius Hun was of the opinion that the words he had spoken were particularly impressive, and was feeling quite proud of himself for coming up with them. Master God Diviner and Song Ke exchanged a glance, and even Zhao Tanjiao seemed surprised. But then, Zhao Tanjiao's smile grew even more sincere than before. Shaking his head, he sat down in front of Bazius Hun. "I'm in love with Chen Yushan, Zius Hun. What am I supposed to do?" Bazius Hun sat down, placing a flagon of spirit alcohol down between them as he did. Master God Diviner, being as quick-witted as he was, quickly took it upon himself to serve them. Bazius Hun lifted his cup and took a sip, his eyes glittering faintly. Zhao Tanjiao didn't rush him. Taking a sip of his own alcohol, he sat there waiting for Bazius Hun to speak. It took Bazius Hun a moment to organize his thoughts, after which, he began to speak, his expression placid, but seemingly profound, like someone who had long since achieved the Tao. Love is a complex and ever-changing thing, like an entire world of interlocking thoughts and emotions. It's not common for people to be able to think clearly when it comes to love, especially considering how many things affect it. Consider, one's personality, one's actions, one's status, and one's other relationships all play a part, as well as sundry other factors. Placing his drinking vessel down, he slowly continued, "Loving someone is a simple thing. However, getting that person to love you back is a skill unto itself. Upon first entering the cultivation world, I did not shrink back from that tribulation called love, and in fact, dominated the field for decades. I received 37,931 love letters, and won the hearts of tens of thousands of young women. I've seen many instances of love, and seen many beautiful women age and fall by the wayside. Although I can't say that I understand everything about the topic, based on what I've experienced, I can claim to have learned a bit." Waving his sleeve, he stuck his chin up, and from the look in his eye, he seemed to have many profound thoughts running through his head. Master God Diviner's eyes went even wider than before, and as for Song Ke, his lips curled with a bit of scorn. The two of them exchanged a look, and both could see how much the other was scoffing at Bazius Hun's blatant, showy display. Zhao Tanjiao coughed dryly, and was about to say something when Bazius Hun suddenly gave him a piercing look. "What I am about to explain now is a secret that took me half a lifetime to perfect. Anyone who masters this secret will have the power to shake heaven and earth, and even cause signs to appear in the sky. Were it to fall into the wrong hands, wicked hands, it would lead to countless young women being struck witless with terror, and likely, plunged into an abyss of misery. Therefore, all of you must remember that this is a secret which cannot be spread beyond this room. The field of love is like the field of battle. In battle, you seek victory, and in love, you seek to win the heart of the person you love. Therefore, I, Bazius Hun, have taken everything I have learned in life, and combined it all into a single character. Win." As he spoke, his voice grew louder, and seemed to surge with intensity. When you break apart the character Win into all its smaller elements, you get death, mouth, moon, shell money, and mortal. 1. The death character represents an awareness of deadly crisis. The mouth character represents the power to communicate properly. The moon character represents how important timing and the environment are. The shell money character represents how important spirit stones are. The mortal character represents how you must always keep your mortal heart calm and peaceful, especially in critical moments. Upon hearing these words, Zhao Tanjiao's expression flickered. He wasn't the only one to react in such a way. Master God Diviner couldn't keep his expression calm, and Song Kei's mind began to spin with numerous thoughts. Even Zhao Tanjiao's two followers gasped, as though they had just received important enlightenment. Never before in their lives had they heard words spoken like this, and the more they thought about them, the more they made sense. This is the summary of all the insight of Love Saint Beziash Hun. My secret method, the wind charm. To emphasize his words, Beziash Hun slapped his hand down onto the ground, the sound of which echoed into the minds of everyone present, leaving them utterly shaken. This. Master God Diviner looked in shock at Beziash Hun, his mind filled with thoughts of the wind charm. Song Kei was gaping in disbelief, trying to figure out how Beziash Hun could possibly have come up with something like this. Zhao Tanjiao lost control of his breathing for a moment before calming down. As of this moment, he was completely convinced that Beziash Hun knew what he was talking about. He really was like a deva, and his wind charm left Zhao Tanjiao feeling as if he had been struck by lightning. Suddenly, whole new worlds of possibility had opened up. This guy took the battlefield that is love, he thought, and all the techniques and skills involved with it, and bound them together into a single character. Just how profoundly skilled is he? Zhao Tanjiao couldn't stop from rising to his feet, clasping hands, and bowing deeply to Beziash Hun. Beziash Hun looked completely and utterly calm. Furthermore, at some unknown point, he had produced a fan, which he slowly swished through the air as he gazed around with an enigmatic smile on his face. The truth was that Beziash Hun hadn't come up with the wind charm on his own. He had received quite a bit of help from Imposter Night Crypt. After all, back in the Bloodstream sect, Imposter Night Crypt had gained a lot of experience in the love department. Although all of his experiences had left him shedding proverbial tears of blood, were it not for his special techniques, neither he nor anyone else in his position could ever have accomplished what he had. A profound look appeared in Beziash Hun's eyes as he slowly said, "The wind charm is just an overview, which I have explained to you today so that you can understand how the field of love is just like the field of battle. And now, I will give a more detailed explanation of the essence of the wind charm. Death, mouth, moon, shell money, mortal. The first aspect is the death character, which represents an awareness of deadly crisis. You need to be prepared for dangerous threats at any moment, and must always remind yourself that a crisis might be around the next corner. After all, Elder Sister Chen is a natural-born beauty with spectacular latent talent. You can't just simply think of her as a young woman with no Taoist partner. Obviously, there are many other disciples in the Starry Sky Tao Polarity sect who secretly have a crush on her, so many that you have no way of knowing how many there are. In fact, forget about the sect as a whole. Even on this very ship, there are surely many disciples who are already in love with her, so if you ignore that sensation of crisis now, then you have already met defeat." To Zhao Tanjiao, Beziash Hun's words felt like a fist punching him in the face. Moments ago, he had felt as if he suddenly understood things more, but now he was left shaking in fear. The truth was that he truly did care about Chen Yushan, but because of his personality, found it impossible to express himself directly. He didn't even know how to try to woo her. Therefore, when he had seen how easily Beziash Hun seemed to handle women, he had came to him for advice. First, he had been shaken by Beziash Hun's love letters, and then came the shocking wind charm. By now, he had complete and utter faith, and couldn't wait to hear what was coming next. "So, what am I supposed to do?" He asked anxiously. "Calm down," Beziash Hun said sincerely, "I'm not finished yet. Although you must always foster that sense of crisis, you mustn't let it show on your face. Keep it alive in your heart only. That way, you will always understand that time is limited." Zhao Tanjiao took a deep breath to calm himself down. Seeing that, Beziash Hun's eyes twinkled with approval. Nodding his head, he continued, "Very good. Now, let's move on to the mouth character, which represents communication and interaction. You say you love Elder Sister Chen, therefore, I won't even wait for your response to the next issue. Have you told her about your feelings, or done anything to act on them? Obviously not, and that's fine. You don't want to be too hasty about such matters. However, you need to find more opportunities to interact with her, and when you do, you must be charming and witty. That's very important. And don't worry about what exactly to say. I'll teach you everything."